Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Oregon Housing Stability Council meeting. For today, we have opened up our virtual room and we're going to take a couple of minutes to let everybody have a chance to get in, get hooked up, get online with the discussion, and then we'll get going. Well, it looks like we've been sitting at 92 participants for a little bit. Do we have a quorum of the council yet? I know we have a couple of excused absences today.
Yes, we do, Chair Hall.
Okay, if there aren't any objections, we will convene the meeting. Good morning, all. Welcome. It is January 5th, 2024. Yes, 2024 already. And welcome to the new year and welcome to the first meeting of the year for the Oregon Housing Stability Council. First off, if we could please have a roll call of the council.
Thank you, Chair Hall. For the record, Councilmember DeFontorum and Councilmember Rogers has been excused today. Councilmember Farrell.
Here.
Chair Hall.
Present.
Councilmember Lee.
Here.
Councilmember Mena.
Here.
Councilmember Harris.
Here.
Councilmember Meehan.
Here.
Councilmember Rodriguez.
Here.
Thank you, council members. Chair Hall, we do have quorum.
Okay, thanks very much. We now move along to the item of public comment. Public comments are offered, presented in the order in which people have signed up. We do have a 3-minute time limit, so if you can watch your clock, and I've got a timer here, I will call people in the order that they have signed up for today. Neil Whitaker.
One moment. I'm looking for Neil on the list. One moment, Neil. Go ahead, Mr. Whitaker.
Got it. Hello, good morning. Respected members of the council and Director Bell, Milepost 5 has a new violent felon in a long pattern of placing felons here. He is the subject of a local news article from June, and his habit of violence towards women and arson drew 6 cops here less than 48 hours ago. This KTVL article is titled, "Man Chased People with Chain, Screamed Racial Slurs, Set Bus Shelter on Fire." A man with a long history of criminal incidents and over 20 convictions was arrested again. Police responded to a bus shelter where a man armed with a chain was chasing people and screaming racial slurs. He had shattered glass on the shelter and set it on fire. Fire department arrived, but the shelter was destroyed. He was arrested on charges of arson, criminal mischief, interfering with public transportation, trespass, disorderly conduct, and menacing. This is just the latest in a long list of violence. In 2021, police responded to him cursing and yelling at passengers. He also urinated on the floor, and the bus had to be taken out of service and cleaned. Again, in 2021, he was arrested on several charges after attacking the bus driver by yelling and throwing several rocks that struck her. In 2022, he was arrested after a series of spitting incidents. Another female driver told police that he had spit in her face as he got off the bus at a stop. He also spit and threw rocks at another bus driver 6 days later. 2023, he was hitting the wall of the bus with a thermos. As the passenger exited the bus, he held the thermos over her head and said, "I'm going to beat you." Caught on security footage. He has over 20 convictions for violent crime and at least 1 felony meth. Notably, most if not all violence towards women, by the way. In these past years of OHCS's stubborn incompetence with Milepost 5, what has really become an endless mess of failures to follow your very own published regulations. You continue to do this, place dangerous felons in housing, and ignore concerns again and again. After your 20-minute presentation on the supposed complexities of tenant screening in May, you just allowed the owner here to completely remove the screening from the lease. So is it confusing, or can this really, what is in place to protect tenants, can it simply be removed and you not even screen for the 2 IRS regulation crimes? I think we deserve an answer as to why the required criminal background screening has been removed entirely from the Milepost 5 lease, and I think we deserve that answer today. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. David Bachman,
Fuck you.
pardon me? Hello? Do we have David Bachman on the line?
Good morning. This is
Good
David
morning.
Bachman. I just wanted the opportunity to introduce myself. I am Dave Bachman. I'm the CEO of Cascade Management. We heard that Cascade was a topic of discussion at the last Housing Council meeting, I believe in relation to the Terracina Vista project. I believe it was actually Cascade Property Management that was mentioned. However, that's another firm that goes by a similar name. We are Cascade Management Incorporated, and we are the assigned property manager for Terracina Vista. And we've been developing and operating affordable housing for properties with the support of OHCS for over 40 years, been in business of doing affordable housing operations development for over 50 years. Now, this is actually our 51st year in operations. But we've continued to provide, I just want to mention that Terracina Vista in particular is an important project to the community, a great addition to our nearly 9,000 units under management, of which nearly 100% are affordable housing. But in addition to introducing myself to you directly, I also wanted to make and offer my availability for direct discussion at any time, either individually or collectively with the council in regards to our 50 years of operation experience in the state and our over 20 years of DEI work in particular. We're always eager to share our experiences and real-time information with the council as you consider property operations. Thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you very much. Rick Solon?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear. Go ahead.
Good morning, Chair Hall, members of the council. Forgive me for being blunt, but we have very limited time here. And I am echoing the concerns of Neil and other tenants that we have spoken multiple times from multiple meetings, from multiple perspectives, and things do not seem to be changing. Now, I'm just trying to get solid information as to if OHCS is not the proper format for bringing these concerns with property management and ownership that is not providing a safe and secure and clean facility for myself and my other tenants. What is the proper venue for this? Because we need assistance. This has been going on and on and on. As Neil mentioned, we have violent felons that are still moving in. We have security issues. Again, as he mentioned, this incident over this last week where we had a possible fire because of a arson conviction that had been moved in, and multiple police incursions. We had fire department. What is OHCS is not the proper government oversight. Who is? We need better security. We've been asking for 24/7 security for over a year now. There's been no progress on this. We still have continuing security concerns. We have doors that are not always secured. We had a front door that apparently was unlocking at random the other night. Things are not working and we need help. So if you guys are not the proper place to help us, we need to know who is. So if we can get that information and we can get that shared, we would greatly appreciate it because this is not working. Thank you and have a great day.
Thank you. Bonnie Robbins.
Good morning, Chair Hall and members of the council. I'm sorry to say that I'm here to repeat what's already been said several times. We need more protection at Milepost 5. We need a lease that requires background checks, which is, from what I understand, a basic requirement of leases that provide low-income housing. We need someone, as like Rick said, it's confusing because no one seems to be requiring this actual action, not just something that's written on a piece of paper, but actual action to happen. It's very concerning. It's very disappointing. It's very confusing. It doesn't seem like much to ask. I know it costs money, but running a business costs money, and that is what the people are doing at Milepost 5. They're running a business. And it's very sad to hear that now this negligence is being rewarded with another new contract. It's hard to believe that you care, that anyone cares about anything besides providing walls and a roof. Minimum safe housing should be expected and should be provided. That's all. Thank you for providing time for public comment.
Thank you. Mark Trinidad. Is Mark Trinidad online?
He is, Chair Hall. Mark, you are muted.
We're still not hearing you.
Mark, you are muted. If you want to unmute yourself. Maybe we can loop back around to Mark.
Okay, let's do that. Trell Anderson.
Good morning, Chair Hall, council members, and Director Bell. Happy New Year. My name is Trell Anderson. I serve as the Executive Director of Northwest Housing Alternatives. Thank you first for serving in such an important role as Housing Stability Council members, providing policy oversight for the multifaceted, multi-million-dollar activities of Oregon Housing and Community Services. At the December council meeting, the council approved funding for a project called Terracina Vista, sponsored by Northwest Housing Alternatives and USA Properties, with Walsh Construction and Michael Willis Architecture as the design team. During those deliberations, a data point was noted that stirred discussion about advancement of goals on MWESB contracting. Regarding MWESB performance, if you recall, the project status note was, quote, has not met, but have good faith efforts, end quote. I'm here this morning to provide a clarification to that note, which was an error on our part in reporting when we filled out the form. In fact, and substantiated by OHCS staff, the most recent MWESB experience with the same development team achieved a 31.9% MWESB participation at the Canopy project, totaling $13.77 million. We should have filled out the form with has met, exceeded. We regret the error and hope this clarification erases questions or concerns about NHA's MWESB performance and restores and reinforces confidence in NHA's outcomes as a project sponsor, Walsh Construction's ongoing success in achieving MWESB goals at the job site, and Michael Willis Architecture, which additionally is a Black-owned firm. Our team is available at your convenience should there be any questions or additional discussion notes. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Shannon Vilhauer. Is Shannon online?
Yes, can you hear me, Chair Hall?
Loud and clear. Go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Hall, Director Bell, and members of the Housing Stability Council. My name is Shannon Vilhauer, and I'm the Executive Director of Habitat for Humanity of Oregon. I'm here this morning to express my strong appreciation for Home Ownership Division Director Keval Giscombe, as well as the Attorney General's Office regarding the Lift for Home Ownership Program evolution. We recently received in December the exciting news that the Attorney General made a ruling that, like Lyft rental, Lyft for home ownership complies with general obligation bond requirements using an operating regimen. This is really exciting and great news. We received also the wonderful news that Director Giscombe is willing to convene a work group that's going to roll up our sleeves together and dig in hard, including OHCS staff members, DOJ attorneys, and key stakeholders to really work on this program to make sure we can reach our shared goals of best serving Oregon households and communities. In the 2023 budget session, the legislature allocated a record amount of Article 11 QGO bonds to support the LIFT program, and up to 80 million of that resource has been set aside to support affordable home ownership. We are so appreciative and really just in such a heartfelt way grateful for this willingness to come to the table together and try to understand how can we bring this program to scale? How can we make it predictable for all participants and really ensure that we're having the intended impact in rural communities and denser developments in suburban and urban settings along public transportation with great access to schools. Why does this matter? If we can get all $80 million out the door as intended, we think that we can serve 400 to 450 households with first-time home ownership. We know that for 27% of households in the United States, that's really the key to wealth building, to triggering wealth building. And that for kids who grow up in affordable homes in the state of Oregon, the high school graduation rate, whether you're in a permanently affordable home, a Habitat for Humanity home, exceeds 92%. That this is really a chance to stimulate the kinds of outcomes we're all working towards together. So I just wanted to, again, say thank you in such a heartfelt way. And also let all parties know that stakeholders will be coming to this table really curious. We're going to show up curious and learning how we can work together over time to lay the strong foundation for this program to continue to have the intended impacts and to grow. So again, thank you especially to Homeownership Division Director Giscombe. Thank you, Director Bell, for your leadership. Thank you, members of the Housing Stability Council, for your investment of time and support in these key programs, and our strong appreciation to the Attorney General and the DOJ team.
Thanks so much. Amber Cook. Amber Cook?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
Excellent. All right. Good morning, OHCS and the Housing Stability Council. I see OHCS elected not to publish the tenant updates on Milepost 5 we submitted for the meeting. We can't be surprised as we see no sign of OHCS being tenant-centered, but we are disappointed in the State Housing Authority refusing to lift or even acknowledge tenant voices. I want to say this on behalf of Milepost 5 Studios renters. We did not agree to fund a city homeless shelter and drugstore with our rents and what is stolen from us when we moved in and signed the lease. The Milepost 5 Lost condominium has no trespassers, squatters, sex workers, or drug dealers. How can CDP not keep the studios cleared when the lofts can with no staff and no on-site security right next door? December 16th, a man parked his SUV in the loading zone at midnight, stood there playing rap music while two compatriots with headlamps turned on came and went. Despite us reporting it in progress, they continued burglarizing the building until the next day. The building is equipped with security cameras that identify suspicious behavior and send alerts. Where were the alerts? How can CDP employ a security company so useless they can't stop hours of open burglary? How can a rental housing property house open drug dealers, pimps with sex workers doing gigs here, at least 9 ineligible felons committing crimes here, people living at the property not on a lease for 3 years at a time? How do they all get in and live here so easily? Because entrances remain unsecured year after year. Security cameras are not used to detect and remove them. Criminals are not prosecuted. Perpetrators are not evicted. Excluded trespassers are somehow not caught on video or found by security despite living on the property on a daily basis in known units. Are there still unsecured entrances? Why, yes, there are. One broken that hasn't been fixed for 4 months, one that can be yanked open without fob or code, and a third that is still reaching around to unlockable from the inside 4 years later. There is something very wrong with how Milepost is handled. It's on landlords to protect safe housing, to provide safe housing for their renters, and on housing authorities to insist on landlords providing safe housing for the renting public they serve. Why can't we live like other renters in the state, in a secured building with no trespassers? Because you let them. And today, you're awarding them yet another LIHTC property. This year, why don't you try something new? Work with us and support us in returning Milepost 5 to being a safe place for low-income renters to live. Thank you.
Thank you. Is Emily Newton online?
I'm here.
Hey, go ahead when you're ready.
Good morning, Council. My name is Emily Newton. I am a resident of 81st Avenue and a direct neighbor to Milepost 5 building. This is my, second year showing up and giving public comment about this building in particular. Today I want to focus on, again, OHCS is saying that they want to center tenant voices at Milepost 5. And I want to reiterate some of what has already been said today about securing the building and instating on-site competent 24-hour security, and really stepping in and making this building safe and clean and habitable for the people who are actually paying rent and are eligible to be living there. 2 nights ago, we had another violent criminal and arson in the building who is on a lease. I don't understand how you can allow CDP and FPI to be renting to people who are multiple convicted felons. We have had a string of that. I myself have been threatened and harassed and assaulted by folks that have lived in the building and have had violent backgrounds. So again, the confusion around, what your role is, the people who are supposed to oversee low-income housing, money that has been awarded to CDP, tell us who we go to for some oversight and some accountability. At this point, you are complicit in what's happening in our neighborhood and what's happening to the tenants in that building. So, and it became aware that you are at the point of funding another LIHTC building for CDP, Julia West, and I'm just like aghast that is even a possibility at this point, given years of us showing up and asking for you to step in and hold CDP accountable. You're the ones that are giving the money. You're the ones that are supposed to be doing oversight. So really just implore you to listen to the tenants, listen to us, and step in and do your job. Thank you.
Thank you. Shelley Pruitt? Is Shelley Pruitt online?
I am here. Do you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear. Please begin.
Thank
if
you.
you're ready.
Thank you. Just here as a representative of the McKenzie Valley in Lane County. I work with the McKenzie Valley Long-Term Recovery Group. Just wanted to thank OHCS and the other organizations that are working hard on this CBDG-DR program that's going to launch. I do want to share a little of the frustrations that happen as a case manager who is the one directly dealing with the wildfire survivors. Our area, unfortunately, has over 100 homes and families still living in rentals, shelters, RVs. This is their 4th winter now since the fire. We're very excited that the funds are coming, slow but sure is what we're told. It's anticipated that the wildfire recovery work will take several more years. We're just excited to be able to get started, but we do have some big hurdles such as timing, weather issues. Even if we were to get people signed up in March as the suggested launch date for this, it's going to be November before environmental surveys are done, contractors identified, housing plans, even if they look at manufactured home units. So if there's any way that we can possibly expedite this application program or get some boots on the ground to hopefully get some of the homework done prior, that would be wonderful. And again, I want to thank all the partners that have helped the long-term recovery group here in Lane County and then all over the state. I speak for a lot of fire survivors and saying thank you for that help.
All right, have you completed your presentation? Did we? I guess so. Thank you. So, shall we try one more time for Mark Trinidad? He was online, but muted. Is Mr. Trinidad still online?
Yes, he is, and he is still muted.
Huh, okay. Well, then I think we should make one request. Is there anybody out there who did not sign up for public comment but would now like to be heard? If so, this is your opportunity. Use the raise hand function on your phone.
*6 or *9, excuse me, if you're on the phone to raise your hand. We have a Sarah Coben that has
Okay.
raised her hand. Go ahead, Sarah.
Hello.
Hello, you're on.
Hi, thank you. Good morning. I am a resident at Milepost 5, and we've had a really rough couple of weeks with several ineligible tenants and squatters attacking us. And there's no thriving in an actively hostile environment. We've all got histories of trauma and abuse, and so we're here trying to make lives without that, and still we're put in the throngs of it. We've have broken exterior doors, sinks, toilets, showers, tubs, and the kitchens didn't even have places to sit until 2 weeks ago. We currently have kitchens that remain in a state of incomplete in their renovation. We've lost our dishwashers to the ongoing renovations in the kitchens. These dishwashers are vital for the disabled tenants that are here. The sinks are not entirely usable. They are industrial with all of the industrial components that would make them usable. The shared community space remains incomplete and insecure, often with squatters and trespassers. But they now have comfy couches, but not much else. The artist workshop that had community tools that were discarded remains a maintenance room. And day and night, we have to protect each other from being attacked, followed, harassed, and police, when they do come to the property, refuse to take people with open warrants, these ineligible tenants and squatters. This is also affecting the management team. They've had to perform CPR, chase assailants, and no help is coming. We have ineligible tenants that could have been avoided with Google searches of their names, and it's a little daunting that us as tenants are better at finding this information than the professionals, and we shouldn't have to be vetting our neighbors. Just this week, we've had run-ins with a specific tenant who, to quote an article about them, as having a long history for attacking TriMet workers and riders and mostly targeting women. They're also an arsonist, and 2 nights ago, the fire department and police were here because of the arson behavior. It was written off as marijuana smoke. And with an open warrant, they did not remove him. I don't know how we can fix our relationship with law enforcement.
Excuse me, we're at our 3-minute time limit for
All right,
testimony,
I'll
but
wrap
thank
up.
you for
Thank
your
you.
input.
But I ask that we have a full inspection of the building with real actionable deadlines. We need 24-hour security, and we need transparent and thorough background checks. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to be heard under public comment who did not sign up in advance? We have this opportunity now, maximum of 3 minutes per person. Okay, at this point, I'm going to close public comment and we'll move on with our agenda. And next up will be the report of the director, Director Andrea Bell. Good morning.
Morning, Chair Hall. I think, well, first off, Happy New Year. Good morning, council members. It's certainly good to be in virtual community with you. Chair Hall, I noticed that we were a little bit out of sync this morning, which we normally start with the report of the chair. So I'm going to yield for the moment and follow our normal course and have you start us off, and then I'll follow.
Okay, I thought they had been reversed, but that's fine. Yeah, well, I want to make just a few comments today about something that's drawn a lot of attention in the past 24 hours. The Secretary of State's audit of how the agency utilized almost $500 million in emergency rental assistance funds. Now, I want to make the point clear to everybody. All but the 3 most recently appointed council members were on board throughout the design and rollout of this program, and they helped provide direction and support to agency staff throughout this process. Our council meetings also offered a platform where providers and others could offer their input. Now, throughout the process, the council fully supported the direction of agency leadership to move forward boldly with getting desperately needed cash help into the hands of renters who were truly bouncing on a precipice, while at the same time acknowledging the strategic risks involved. As chair of this council, I believe that accountability is important and absolutely necessary to assure the public that their dollars are being used wisely for their intended purpose. But the prime directive, the #1 task of our collective work, is now and always to provide shelter to people in need. Thanks. Director Bell, I'll pass it back to you now.
Yeah, thank you for that, Chair Hall. Well, first off, I'll just say Happy New Year. I know we have a busy and abundant year ahead, so I want to just acknowledge and appreciate the council for all of our council members for all of the work and partnership that we've gone through over the last year. Certainly looking forward to all of the things that are ahead of us for 2024. So here's to more time virtually and in person together. And I'll touch on that for just a moment at the conclusion of my comments, but I want to just offer a few things. So maybe I'll start also, Chair Hall, just as a continuation of one of your comments. I think as the council knows, we've been even though the pandemic itself is over, I know that the Oregon Emergency Rental Assistance Program, I think there's just collective awareness that that performance audit is out. And what I want to make clear of and just also highlight in it, which I think is probably one of the most important pieces, at least from my seat as part of that audit, which is the intention of the audit and the intention of that, both from Secretary of State's perspective and from our shared perspective, which was to have a really an objective body of work that looks back at that moment in time, to look and to have really clear lessons learned to help the agency grow, to help the executive branch continue to grow, even though the pandemic itself is not something that is often replicated. There is an abundance of learning, certainly, that I have taken, that the agency has taken from that experience, that we want to make clear that there are a lot of challenges and learnings along the way in that. And so we certainly appreciate all of the OHCS staff, the many OHCS staff, and certainly Secretary of State staff that spent a lot of time over these past weeks and months, really coming from a place of curiosity and digging into, and also making sure that we don't lose sight of the conditions, really unique conditions and circumstances that took place during the pandemic, not only from a public health perspective, but also from an economic perspective. We know there were a lot of folks across the state, many of our neighbors and loved ones in our lives that were experiencing the day in and day out stressor and trauma of not knowing if you're going to have your rent paid. And for anybody that's gone through that experience knows that that is an untenable experience for people to go through. And I also want to acknowledge and appreciate, frankly, all of the partners that help us serve those 67,000 plus households. Certainly the audit is a constructive look and a place of feedback for the agency, and we appreciate and take all of that seriously, and have begun to adopt some of those recommendations as applicable. But really that mandate for the Emergency Rental Assistance Program was able to be that mandate was able to be achieved really because of so many partners across the state. I also want to say one of the things I'm grateful for as I reflected upon that audit, and quite frankly, the experience, is I'm grateful that even with all of the challenges and learnings that have come from that, that the story here in Oregon isn't that we had millions of federal dollars that will return back because they weren't spent. I'm grateful that that is not the story here in Oregon, that people got served. Not all people got served that needed assistance, but we served a lot of folks. And so I'm grateful for that. And I think as part of our way forward, our mandate remains clear. We remained clear-eyed and focused on ensuring that we as the state's housing agency and steward of so many resources, that we continue to make real progress, not abstract progress, but real progress in the lives that people can see and feel. And even though the Emergency Rental Assistance Program itself is nearly over, our work isn't. And so we take all of that into the way forward. And so just appreciation certainly for the council, but really all of the partners that poured their sweat equity and time and persistence and gave us feedback along the way as part of that effort. So I want to just acknowledge and appreciate that. Secondly, I want to briefly mention something that it's been some time since I've talked about for quite some time, but I imagine in these months ahead, it will be a topic that maybe gets a little bit more, continues to get a little bit of our time and energy, which is around private activity bonds. I'm a little bit of a broken record here, but as this council knows, really one of the most effective federal policies for getting housing built is a program within the tax code. So it's the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit Program. It is continues to be urgently necessary because our state, just like so many other states, are really focused on building more housing, building more affordable housing, building more market rate housing. And our hope, our desire towards the end of 2023 was that we would see progress on a tax bill, particularly the Affordable Housing Credit Improvement Act. And our hope in that was that we would see an expansion of the 9% credit and reduce the bond financing test to 25% for 4% credit developments. I think I could blubber on forever, and I certainly don't want to put people to sleep here, but I think this council knows we bring deals to you every single month, and so many of those are reliant upon the availability of private activity bonds. And so our hope coming into 2024, while I don't have a magic wand and certainly can't forecast the future, what our hope is and what our sort of shared desire is for the council is that we can continue in Oregon to galvanize and to push for the importance of making sure that that comes, that reaches the finish line. I think that tax bill really hasn't been revised or meaningfully updated since the 80s. And we're certainly grateful that here in Oregon that the legislature, that our governor is pushing for certainly more resources to build more housing. That is our focus. We'll continue to be focused on creatively using all of our financing tools and strategies, and we need help from the federal government. And this is a clear and specific way that we're going to continue to be incessant in that area. So as we continue to push for that, we'll continue to bring that to council. I think of note, the last time that we talked about, or at least I talked about this particular matter that we want to see action on, we didn't have all of Oregon's congressional delegates represented. We now have all of Oregon's congressional representatives signed on to that, which I think is a sign of progress and the ultimate sign of progress. We're getting something over the finish line on that regard. And then the last thing that I will mention is Director Chelsea Bunch had previously come to provide updates around sort of the behind the scenes, behind the curtain agency work that has been underway and active for some time now about the agency's work really with the Center for Equity and Inclusion about not only consciousness raising in terms of what it means to fully live out our values of centering and advancing race, because we know that not only is that our responsibility, but there's also, we know that the health of our economy, the health of our communities requires that everybody be well. And we know that we have to have very intentional efforts to do that. And so we will be entering phase 2, we'll be entering the next phase of that work here in January 2024. Over the last year or so, as we've expanded within the agency leadership and staff that have been engaged in that competency work together, that has begun to be part of the fabric of how the agency does our work, not just only focusing on what we do, but how we do it and being transparent about that. And our HR team has also began their learning journey as part of that too, recognizing that the effectiveness of the agency and advancing the work that we need to do, the work that we aspire to do, is really comprised of who makes up the agency, not only in terms of expertise, but experience. And so we felt it's really important for our HR policies and practices and vision be in alignment with that. Now, as we brought that to you, what we've heard feedback on really loud and clear, resounding from the council was where is the opportunity for the council to be engaged in that? And so I want to make sure that the council knows that that has not fallen on ears that have not been responsive. And so what, as part of that ongoing work, there is going to be an opportunity. We're going to bring the council into that work. And so I want to just preview that for an earlier discussion, so that we as a collective agency, as a collective team, inclusive of the council, that we can also begin to have some shared language, shared framework, and also make sure that as we are learning and growing, we are learning and growing expansively and together in that. So without regard for all of the logistics, I wanted to just preview that at the onset for some future conversation for council engagement. And as part of that, that means we'll also have more in-person time together. So this will be the perhaps the work in front of us is to figure out the coordination of all of that. But I think the work in front of us is going to require us to have much more time together, intentional time together, and to make sure that we're centering learning together in that regard too. So excited for all of that's to come. I think that closes out my updates for now, Chair Hall. So I will yield and see if there's any feedback or questions from the council on any of those things or anything writ large before I turn it to you, Chair Hall.
All right, council, anybody with questions, feedback for Director Bell at this time? Well, not seeing any. I think we will move on to agenda item number 5, which is the presentation from the Affordable Rental Housing Division. And is the team ready to go?
We are. Thank you.
Good.
Oh, I see a
Oh.
hand.
Councilmember Harris?
Thank you, Chair Hall. I just wanted to state for the record that I have a conflict of interest with the Julia West project, so I'll be abstaining from discussion or voting on that one.
Okay, thank you for that notification. All right,
Thanks.
team, now take it away, please.
Great. Thank you, Chair Hall, Director Bell, council members. Nice to see you all today and Happy New Year. You have only ARH today for the rest of your agenda, so we will keep things active because we have quite a few items today. I think as we kick off, I want to acknowledge the testimony this morning on a few different topics, Milepost 5 included. We do have posted on our Housing Stability Council page our follow-up and feedback from the last month's testimony, and we'll continue to actively track all conversation and input that we hear in this space, as well as through staff reporting to the staff on those subjects. So first up on our agenda is the recommendation for 3 4% low-income housing tax credit projects. And I will hand that off to Ty Dunson-Strain to cover. I do want to kind of connect back through to acknowledge that CDP, the owner of Milepost 5, is also the owner developer of the Julia West project, which is being presented today. Ty will, the detailed write-up of that is in your packet, and Ty will talk through that as well. We have applied significant attention to both CDP's performance and the partnerships that they are investing in and prioritizing in this project. And this project includes CDP as well as NARA and the Northwest Pilot Project, who are actively working to prioritize and center responsiveness and active engagement with tenants through this project. And that's where we do have confidence that this will be able to be successful. And so with that, Ty, I'll share my screen and you can start your presentation.
Good morning, council members, Director Bell. For the record, Ty Dunson-Strain, transaction AD. Happy New Year. I think we can still say that. Happy New Year to everybody. And thanks for making time today. Really appreciate it. So here to present three transactions. First with Julia West, sponsored by CDP. It's in Portland. It's a 90-unit project. Killingsworth Apartments, sponsored by Home Forward, and Olive Plaza is going to be a last transaction sponsored by Human Good Affordable Housing. So next slide. So the first project, it's we have PSH and the 4% tax credit and conduit bonds. It's a 90-unit project with a range of unit size and 0 studios and one bedrooms. We've got PSH capital of 18 million and conduits over a little over 29 million. The project all sponsors include NARA and Northwest Pilot as discussed, and this project has walls construction in it, and it meets our statewide housing plan alignment with equity, racial justice, homelessness, permanent supportive housing, and affordable rental housing. With that, I can pause and ask for questions for this project, or I can continue on for and give kind of the overview of the next project, whatever council desires.
Okay, Counselor Lee has her hand up, so I'll turn the floor over to her.
Chair Hall, this is, or perhaps Shalo, this is a procedural question. Are we voting on mass, all three at the same time? Or are we voting them each as one? I know some of these come in the forms of a resolution, which all three projects are on, and we either vote the resolution up or down, and sometimes we do them separately. So apologize for my ignorance, but if you could tell me what we're doing, which one of those we're doing, that'd be great.
You are correct, Councilmember Lee. This is a resolution that has 3 of the projects listed.
Okay. So we either have to vote all 3 up or all 3 down. We cannot amend the resolution to discern amongst these 3 projects. Is that correct?
That is my understanding, but I will defer to Director Detweiler Davey.
And can we get the why if that's true?
I would imagine, I think, I don't know, Director Bell, if you have more insight on this, but I think we can amend the resolution.
Okay. I know that we started this practice a while ago with the advice of DOJ and for expediting this work and not feeling like we were rubber stamping things. So I remember why we did it. I just wanted to know what our options are if indeed we want to amend the resolution, and it sounds like we can.
Councilmember Lee, that is accurate from my understanding that the resolution was a procedural approach in effort to try to expedite, but there is nothing from my understanding that would preclude the council, from individually having conversations and individually voting on each proposal.
Okay, Councilmember Farrell.
Just another procedural question. Is Councilor Harris abstaining from voting due to her stated conflict of interest or simply stating her conflict of interest? And if so, do we have a quorum?
Abstaining from voting, and we will still have quorum.
Okay.
Okay, so Councilmember Lee again.
Thanks. So now that we have this clarification, Chair Hall, do you want us to address project by project, our questions or comments, or do you want to wait till we get through all 3 and then address any proposals, notions, questions there? Just wanting to make sure how you want us to proceed.
Well, I think we should probably address questions and comments project by project. I think that, that's just, let's finish one, move on to the next, and so on. Does that make sense to everybody? Councilmember Farrell, your hand's still up. Was there something more you had?
Well, yeah, so am I clear that we can talk about this project now? And Councilor Lee, I didn't want to stop you. If you wanted to make comment, I will let you go first.
Okay. Thank you. So if I'm going to be proposing an amendment to the resolution that takes this project out of the resolution, and it is solely and predominantly around the involvement of CDP. I have an enormous amount of trust in Northwest Pilot Project. I have an enormous amount of trust in NARA, and I have very little to no trust in CDP, given the feedback we hear from tenants. And let me be clear, I listen to the tenants very carefully, and I am baffled by the continuing struggle that this property and the people living in this property are continuing to have. And it, I've tried to educate myself. I've tried to listen very well. I know staff are working hard on this, and there is still something happening here that isn't working. And the only place that I can put my eye on is this company. And again, I think we've asked for some feedback and some presentation and some showing up to be able to engage. And I know lots of stuff is happening that I don't know about and I'm not meant to know about. However, I cannot in good conscience support this project. And this has nothing to do with the Julia West, which is an amazing community. It's been here forever. It does amazing work. And I can't see myself doing it. So either I am abstaining or I am proposing an amendment to the resolution. Thank you.
All right. Councilmember Farrell?
Thank you, Chair Hall. I would be seconding Councilor Lee's proposed amendment to this resolution for all of the same reasons. I don't actually have familiarity with any of the other partners except for CDP based on tenant feedback. And while I understand the recommendation is coming from staff to fund this project based on confidence in the partners, I don't understand how we can overlook poor performance, at least alleged poor performance, and not have some accountability for future funding. I don't know that it's true that other strong partners cancel out concerns with a third partner. So for all of the same reasons that Councilor Lee expressed, I also would not feel comfortable at this point in time approving any proposal that involves CDP.
Okay, Councilmember Meehan.
I'm going to have to echo Councilmember Lee and Councilmember Farrell. I am not feeling that until we get some feedback and resolution from what's already currently going on with CDP, I'm not comfortable voting to pass this without some kind of feedback from the situation with Milepost 5 as well.
Director Bell.
I want to make sure first off, I'm not jumping in line in front of any council members here. So I'm just scanning my virtual screen here. Okay, appreciate the council members' feedback, perspective, and I think some version of alignment here. What I would call the council to, two things. What I would call the council to get clear upon is what is the council seeking and what information is the council asking for in determination of what information is needed to weigh on making a decision. Because I hear the council's feedback and a decision does need to be made, and the council does need to be clear and specific about what criteria, specific objective criteria that staff needs to gather, whether it be from CDP or collectively the partners to weigh in and to make a decision, given the role of the council. So Chair Hall, I'll turn it to you. And then I think, Natasha, I would just also maybe call in to see if there's anything additional that needs to be considered in terms of timing, and then also due diligence and follow up with partners as well.
Okay, I'm going to call the raised hands in the order I see them. Councilmember Meehan.
Thank you, Director Bell and Chair Hall. And I would like to also acknowledge that I really appreciate and respect the work that's done from Director Detweiler Dabby and the Affordable Housing Division here at OHCS. I would like personally I'm new to the council, and I know that I don't know, as Councilmember Lee said, there's things I don't know, there's things I probably shouldn't know. But I do want to hear from the property management company. I want to hear where they stand on management of units, Milepost 5, or the place that's already being funded by this agency. I would like to see. Again, I also would like to echo Councilmember Lee with Northwest Pilots is a great program. NARA is a fantastic program. I'd like to see, however, property management being have some kind of plan here. This was not working with Milepost 5, and I would hate to see another situation like that in the future for these tenants at Julia West. That would not be okay.
Councilmember Farrell. Oh, Councilmember Lee.
Oh, no, I was gonna go. I'm still here.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so I don't know honestly that there's questions that I have for staff that I need answers to. I feel like my gut is coming from the years of public comment that these issues aren't resolving, and I think when we already approved additional funds that were intended to improve the property of Milepost 5, there were a lot of conditions that were made after lengthy discussion amongst our council around accountability, and that we wanted to see that there was measurable impact as reflected by the tenants. And I just am still not hearing that. So for me, what I believe that I've understood is that once the funds have been awarded, we have not a lot of control over what happens because the property is owned by the developer, the owner, whoever. It is not owned by OHCS. So once funds have been approved, we're limited in our oversight. The only oversight that I can see that we have is to not continue to reward developers or owners in the future who have not performed to our expectations. And to me, that's probably where I'm going to stay.
Councilmember Lee.
Thank you, Chair Hall. And Natasha, you said that staff had spent significant time reviewing and going over the proposal in light of the Milepost 5 experiences. So part of what might be helpful for us to hear is to get more specifics about that and where you landed on that specifically. I would also very much like to see, we know the themes, we know the issues that have been being raised by the tenants of Milepost 5. I would like to see a specific and detailed response from CDP saying, here's how this will not happen at Julia West. Here's how this will not happen in Julia West. Here's what we're doing to make sure this will not happen at Julia West, point by point or theme by theme. So those are two pretty specific things that would help me better understand. And I want to say that part of what I think I'm hearing between the lines is it's okay because Northwest Pilot Project and NARA are there to help make things go better and make things go right. And if I am hearing that, even a whiff of that, I can't support that. I can't support that we're going to do business with a company or an organization that we have not had a great track record with in a really significant project, and saying that we're going to shore them up with two culturally specific organizations and expect that that's going to get us to where we want to get to. So I also want to say, I realize that this, by the time projects come to us, the financing timelines are so very, very tight, and there could be significant consequences to not moving this forward. However, Councilmember Farrell's comments are very well taken. Once we do this, it's done. And so if this is the moment that we have to pose the questions, then I feel like it's my responsibility as a member of this council to pose these questions. And if that means we have to schedule a special meeting, in a week from now, so that we can see the work and the due diligence that staff has done that might allow us to come to a different decision on this, I am willing to do whatever is needed in order to bring the least amount of harm to the residents of the Julia West house as we make sure that the property management company and the owner is going to be able to do what we need them to do. I think this is we're from my perspective, I feel like there's some prevention focus here that we don't want to get into a similar situation. And I'm sure staff did a lot of due diligence on this. I know how hard you work. So if we could see some of that and be educated to some of that, and then, like I said, I want a point by point, theme by theme, addressing from the project of how what's happening in Milepost 5 isn't going to happen at Julia West. Thank you.
And thank you. Director Detweiler Dobby.
I was just going to respond to a couple of things, just I think just to provide additional context over my comment. CDP with their service providers and project management participated in our Permanent Supportive Housing Institute. This project was part of that original cohort. They have led through, as part of the 2019 to 20 Institute with Alder House, which was the rehabilitation project across the street, which is 30 units of PSH. Julia West is the new construction component of that project. And so it is, by virtue of all of that really detailed work in collaboration with staff, as well as the Corporation for Supportive Housing, where we have confidence that these are solid and significant structures and attention to really build that out. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that in terms of my comment and providing more context around where we have confidence about that project, and you know, to also acknowledge that CDP operates many projects across the state.
Hey, Councilmember Meehan.
Thank you, Director Detweiler Dobby. I appreciate your update there with that. My other concern is really, and maybe this is my lack of knowledge or understanding, but from the side of lived experience, I'd like to say that the time limits of these 30-year PSH and the 30-year affordability, those things time out. And I'm always very leery, especially when I see in real time when those affordability timelines time out, which I have seen over here in the East County at Gresham Station, and watching disabled and elderly people be forced out of their homes because they can't afford them. So I maybe that's a lack of my understanding, and maybe some education or background on that would be helpful for me. But I really also have a tough time with the 30-year time limit, because I know people that are being timed out in real time, and it's a doozer.
Hey, Councilmember Farrell.
I guess I just want to say that I wasn't on the council at the time that Milepost 5 was recommended for funding, but I am confident, based on how this team works, that there were really strong justifications made for that project at that time as well, with lots of due diligence and strong feelings that it was going to be successful, and it has not been. And I guess it's just my feeling that if a company wants to continue to be eligible to receive public funds, they should be aggressively trying to correct behavior that is harming the public in their properties. And we haven't seen that, based on the feedback we're hearing from tenants, that has been aggressively corrected. So I guess my question is really, at what point is the only accountability that this group has with a funded entity to simply not fund them again? Because once they're funded, there's, like we've already basically discovered, there's not much we can do once they're funded, other than not fund them again. So I think that's where some of us might be coming from.
Okay, Councilmember Mena.
Thank you, Chair Hall. Just wanted to echo what has been said, and this is the opportunity that we have, where CDP has been active in Oregon, has a lot of projects, but the lack of at least communication, the lack of addressing an issue, and this has been going on for 2 years, at least 2-3 years from what we gather, is troubling. And so if there's no reason why any owner, we should fund any owner that has properties that are not being dealt with in an appropriate manner for the benefit of the tenants. And this is where the rubber meets the road in terms of what is the past performance, and are we going to reward even though the past performance has not been, even on one project. It doesn't matter they have 100. There's one project that needs to be addressed, and we have not heard, at least from what my fellow council members, myself, anything regarding what they're doing to deal with it, and the problems continue. And so I want to echo everything that's been said, and it's very challenging to move forward the project with the developers as we see the challenges that they're having.
Councilmember Rodriguez.
Yeah, I as well echo what my fellow council members are stating. The issue that I would like to see is CDP come up and actually inform us of how they are going to take care of these new tenants' needs at this Julia Park. I don't think that it's fair that we potentially will set up these tenants for failure with CDP. And so I am also in agreement with my fellow council members that we actually need to see a plan in place first before we can agree on this project.
Okay, Ty, let's see. You're up, sir.
Yeah, so I'm just tracking through my notes of what the deliverables should be. And we, so a detailed response at, asking for an addressing of the themes that were brought by the tenants, by CDP and the property manager, and how these are going to be rectified in preventative for the Julia West project. So those were two specific call outs.
Yeah. If I may, Chair Hall,
Yes.
apologies, Ty. I want to just attempt to provide a summary here, I think, of what I'm hearing, and I'll look to the council to keep me honest on whether this is accurate. So I'm hearing sort of 3 categories of themes under the collective umbrella of alignment of this is what centering tenant voice looks like in real time. And so I want to just acknowledge that I hear the council having the important and I think the friction and the appropriate kind of tension and conversation with being in alignment with needing more affordable housing and wanting to get projects over, and also recognizing that we've heard from tenants, we've heard very specific things from tenants, and there is a clear demonstrable ask from the council to CDP that the council is clear on. And so I want to just acknowledge the reality that this is the council both living up to its values of production and wanting to make sure that we are centering tenants and taking the appropriate pauses where we need to. I'm hearing 3 categories of feedback. So the first on, I think, let me start with the priority, which is what is the call to action here? I'm hearing that the ask from the council to CDP is for a detailed action plan to reflect themes and specific matters that have been brought up from the tenants as a preventative course of action to lay out and specify how CDP plans to address, on a preventative measure, plans to address those things to ensure that we don't have a mirroring effect in the Julia West project. I think that's what I'm hearing, theme 1, so I'll look for confirmation there. Yes, I'm also hearing that there is alignment that council will commit to making a special meeting if necessary to ensure, 1, that the council will be responsive to reviewing the information provided from CDP while making sure that timelines can remain unabated as well. So I'm hearing theme 2 in that. Natasha, when is this project set to close? So I want to be clear about what timelines we're
Yeah,
actually
I
looking
think it is set to close at the end of the month. So I think there
Okay.
would be time to do a reschedule. And I think we can continue to explore those options. And just one other
Sure.
for council awareness, I understand and acknowledge that CDP has not been present in public testimony in these recent meetings. They have been on a monthly basis engaging with staff, following up on every inquiry with us directly. And we have incorporated that information into our monthly update. So while I appreciate the feeling of silence, I want to acknowledge that they have been engaging.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you for that, Natasha. And as a matter of just that clear course of action that will need to take place this month, we can also talk about the form and function of both having something in plain text and also perhaps having some presence from CDP if and as needed at the council's request and availability. So that's theme one. I think theme two that I heard was a mention from Councilmember Meehan around 30-year affordability. I think my hearing is that yes, there is some energy and interest in wanting to have a broader conversation about that. I'm not hearing that that is an issue germane to a issue that needs to be weighed at this moment. And so I'll look for confirmation of that. I'm seeing confirmation of that, but we will have a follow-up conversation, Councilmember Meehan, around 30-year affordability and just extended affordability writ large. So we will take that back. And then I'm also hearing a third theme of perhaps a broader and future conversation around how we as the council and we collectively also have preventative and proactive strategy and conversation about if we were to eventually, we're building more housing. And so it is probably eventual that we will have similar instances in which the council will need to be engaged and perhaps give direction to the agency and feedback around this, how we better position ourselves to have some values and some clear shared expectations about that. Again, not seeing that as a matter that will weigh in on decision making for this particular, but as a item that will need attention and conversation. Okay. Thank you for that. So, Natasha, that's what I'm seeing as number one action item coming out of this for this particular project. Thank you.
Yeah, and so I see raised hands. I will also, so I think our intent at this moment is that we will move forward with the remaining 2 transactions in a revised, in an amended resolution, and pick up that body of work to have a follow-up discussion.
Hey, Councilmember Lee.
Thank you, Director Bell. That is an accurate reflection of what I was hoping to see. There's one other piece that I had asked for that I want to make sure we get to, which is, Natasha, you had said, and I know this, staff has done a lot of research, due diligence, engagement, because you were likely expecting these questions. And it would be great to start there, right? I think we have to, we do rely upon our staff and the professional expertise that they have, and we do not. So if we could add to that list as the first starting place to just get the same information that you all have been working with, that includes your conversations with CDP, et cetera, that would be a great grounding place. And then we can go to the other list of pieces, Director Bell, that you have outlined, including a future oriented discussion about, we're going to get into conflict. Things are not going to go perfectly. We are human beings, all of us. What happens when these kinds of challenging conflicts happen, and how do we respond? What are our practices? I'm very interested in having that conversation. Thank you.
Hey, Councilmember Farrell.
I think this might have been implied in that third category of future conversations, but I am not hearing in the summary the mention of accountability. And I guess that's where I continue to have some challenges, because CDP can have the best plan in the world about how they're going to address this and prevent it. But if they know that once the funds are awarded, there's nothing that we can do and it won't harm future efforts to receive funding, I don't know what they're being held accountable to then. And I guess that's maybe a question I have for staff is what can OHCS and cannot OHCS hold funders accountable for? And if there is no consequence for poor performance, then I think that needs to be very transparent.
Yeah. If I may, Chair Hall, very briefly, I
Yes.
know I didn't raise my hand here. Thank you for that, Council Member Farrell. And yes, it was implied, so thank you for explicitly naming it. I think we can do two things coming from this conversation. I think the first is in the follow-up information that we provide to the council that provides an insight into the due diligence that staff have engaged in. We can also include information around what existing accountability is, because I want to make sure that the council is really clear and specific on what existing accountability is and whether the council is seeking to engage and understand what something above and beyond that looks like and what the implications thereof are. We've scratched the surface of it a bit, but I don't think we've provided a really sound in writing understanding of what existing accountability looks like. And then we can absolutely, as part of the future forward conversation that we've taken as a commitment to have in not the distant future, but in the nearer future, is also having that conversation around what shared accountability looks like in anticipation for just inevitable challenges and things that arise, and what the council would implore the agency to work towards. So thank you for naming that. I'll turn it to you, Chair Hall. I know we've got to get to other matters.
Okay, Councilmember Meehan.
Just one quick comment on this, and I'll be done with it. Just even though you can't hold one project or one community hostage for another, I have a tough time with CDP and not being held accountable for the current Milepost 5, and then trying to offer them more money to do a new project, just because they're not being held accountable to from a tenant's voice for what's going on right now. And I'm done. Thank you.
All right, so let's circle back, touch base. Definitely a desire to separate out this one project from the other two. And I think Councilmember Lee, you indicated a willingness to offer such a motion.
Do you
Would you
want
like to do
me to
that?
do that now, or do you want to wait for the presentation of the other two projects?
Yeah, that's
We
probably
call the
good.
question and then I'll make an amendment?
Okay, that sounds good. Let's move ahead with the presentation.
Okay, next up, so Killingsworth Apartments is sponsored by Home Forward. It's a 84 unit project in Portland, and it was awarded LIFT funds totaling over little close to 10 million, as well as PHB Metro bonds. Includes a range of units, studios, one, twos and threes, and the building is going to be operated by Home Forward. It includes let me pull up that. They have a range of partnerships. Lost my a range of partnerships are included in the project. Here we go. They're partnering with NEA and have partnerships identified with Hacienda Self-Enhancement. There's going to be on the ground floor a early learning center is going to be operated by with NEA in partnership with PCC. Walsh O'Neill is going to be the general contractor. Meets two of our statewide housing plan alignment with equity and racial justice and affordable rental housing. With that, happy to entertain any questions for this project before we move forward to the last project.
I don't see any tie. I think we can go forward to the Olive Plaza.
Okay, next up, Olive Plaza, 150 unit project in Eugene, operated by Human Good of Affordable. This is one of their first transactions in Oregon in quite some time. They currently are in conversations with a variety of partners, but they are acquiring this property, and once they acquire, they will formalize the partnerships with various culturally specific organizations that they've identified. The building is they're also going to be self-managing the building, and Walsh Construction is the general contractor on here. And just note that on the MWSP performance piece, the reason it says indicates as insufficient data is just because this is one of we haven't captured enough project data with this Human Good Affordable as a project sponsor. So once we get enough data, then we'll be able to report out how they're doing. So happy to answer any questions on the remaining the two projects that will be included in the amended resolution.
My apologies, I was muted. Council, any questions, feedback on these two projects? Councilmember Meehan.
Just one quick question or comment. Is there any feedback from partners in Lane County? I'm not familiar with Human Good Affordable Housing. I am familiar with Homes for Good. So I just was wondering if there was any feedback from agency partners in Lane County or Eugene area that were in support of the project.
We haven't seen any outreach direct. I mean, the the housing authority in Lane County is aware of the transaction, and we haven't heard anything outside of Human Good Affordable is engaging in the community and meeting with various partners and talking to the community college. But they're a large operator in Washington State and operates nationwide. So
Thank you for that. It would be nice to hear from support, folks that support it down there in Lane County, but I appreciate your answer. Thank you.
Okay, now procedurally, I'll just circle back to staff, but I believe if somebody makes a motion to approve the motion, moves the resolution on page 7 of our packet with an amendment, will that follow? Will that to exclude Julia West? Will that procedurally satisfy our obligations?
That is accurate, Chair Hall.
Okay. Who would like to make the motion to adopt the resolution as amended?
Well, I'll propose to amend the resolution, but I don't know if we need a first and a second for the existing resolution.
Well, it depends on how closely we follow parliamentary order. And it would call actually for the motion to be moved and seconded first before amending. So let's just keep things safe. First, would somebody like to offer a motion to approve the proposed item on page 7 of our packet?
Just for clarification, Chair Holt, so we have to approve the motion and then we call for a resolution? No.
No,
Okay.
we have to
Oh,
move
thank you.
move the motion so it's on the table for discussion. Then the amendment would be in order. We'd vote on the amendment, and if it passes or not, vote on the main motion.
Yeah, so what more to, and now where are we at that process? Did Councilmember Lee?
I think we are still asking.
Yeah, we need
Chair Hall,
somebody
you want
to-
us to make a motion, seconded it, but then before we vote, then Counselor Lee will make an amendment, and that is what we'll vote on, right?
Correct.
Yeah, well, we'll vote on the amendment, then we'll vote on the amended motion if we're sticking to parliamentary order. So it's going to take 2 votes to get that.
Oh, so we're gonna make a motion, second it, vote it down. Then
No,
we're going, no, okay.
no, we're going to make a motion, second it, and then propose the amendment. And if it's seconded and approved, then we vote on the amended form of the motion.
Great, that's what I was thinking.
I know this gets a little arcane, but okay.
I
so-
will second the motion from Councilmember Lee.
Okay, we have, wait a minute, no.
She
never
I haven't made a motion.
Okay. At one
Okay,
point
we're just
earlier,
asking
you
questions.
said
Sorry,
you would
guys.
be-
Never mind.
No,
I'm
no,
saying
it's
nothing.
okay.
At one point earlier, I think you said you would be willing to make a motion, so.
Yes, I was willing to make the amendment, but I was avoiding making the motion,
The
so I
main
wasn't
motion.
moving and amending. But as long as that doesn't give any heartburn, I move the resolution as presented by staff. And then Councilmember Meehan is seconding it. And now
Okay.
I will propose an amendment to the resolution, which is that we remove for the time being the proposal related to the Julia West project, pending the additional information that we have clarified from staff in including a special meeting that the council would hold in order to not delay further the deliberation on the project itself.
And I will
Okay.
second that.
And we have a second to Councilmember Lee's amendment. Now, is there further discussion on the amendment? Hearing none, I'll request a roll call vote on the amendment.
Thank you, Chair Hall. Councilmember Farrell,
Yes?
Chair Hall,
Yes.
Councilmember Lee,
Yes.
Councilmember Mena,
Yes.
Councilmember Meehan,
Yes.
Councilmember Rodriguez.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion to amend the resolution has passed.
All right, now the amended resolution is on the floor for discussion and action. Any further council deliberation on the amended motion? Okay, then I'll ask if we could please get a roll call on the amended motion.
Amended motion now includes Killingsworth Apartments and Olive Plaza Apartments. We will be voting on both items. Councilmember Farrell,
Yes.
Chair Hall,
Yes.
Councilmember Lee,
Yes.
Councilmember Mena,
Yes.
Councilmember Harris,
Yes.
Councilmember Meehan,
Yes.
Councilmember Rodriguez.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion for Olive Plaza Apartments and Killingsworth Apartments is approved and passed.
All right, good job, everybody. Thank you. All right, next agenda item was the PSH Risk Mitigation Pool Framework. And taking up this discussion again, and who's going to lead off for us?
Great, thank you all for the direction, and let's move forward through what is still a big agenda here in front of us. We're really excited to be bringing back to you our permanent supportive housing PSH risk mitigation pool framework. This is the second time specifically engaging on this, and we do have a motion this time. And so Assistant Director of Planning and Policy Rick Ruzicka and Resources Manager Amy Cole will be presenting today. And Rick, I'll share my screen now.
Thank you, Natasha, and good morning, Chair Hall, Director Bell, and council members. As Natasha said, for the record, my name is Rick Ruzicka. I'm the Assistant Director of Planning and Policy, and I have Amy Cole here today, who's a State Development Resource Manager, to help me in case there's questions I can't answer. I'll try to be quick through the agenda, so next slide, please. Just as a refresher, this is the PSH risk mitigation pool that we are asking for approval for today to establish this framework. The goals of this program are to support our PSH developments who are having higher than expected operating costs. PSH developments are a new program. We anticipated having to make some adjustments, and I believe this is one of those adjustments. We're also trying to decrease insurance claims that our PSH properties are having, which can lead to higher operating costs and higher insurance premiums. And there's concern that an increase in claims can also put their insurance coverage for their entire portfolio at risk, and we certainly don't want that to happen. We're really looking for operational stability with these funds, and are trying to assure continued interest in ownership and management of new PSH developments. Certainly, folks are going to have some concern developing PSH in the future if we can't stabilize the operation costs, and insurance claims can lead to losing coverage. And so we think this is an important stopgap measure for that. The eligibility requirements around the program, there's basically 4 things that you have to have in place in order to receive, to be eligible for the PSH risk mitigation pool. You need to be able to prove that you're utilizing coordinated entry or other OHC approved processes in filling the PSH units. You need to be utilizing project-based rent assistance of some kind. That can be either kind of a local thing or something that we are providing through one of our programs. You need to be able to prove that you're incorporating wraparound supportive services, which is a pillar in the PSH program. And you have to currently be in the OHCS portfolio. Doesn't mean you have to go through our PSH development process, but you need to be within our portfolio and have restrictions on your property. The uses for this particular pool would be physical damages, including costs to repair units and community spaces beyond normal wear and tear, extraordinary operational costs, and relocation costs if that becomes necessary, all around a PSH client. So it has to be specific to PSH client within your property. Next slide, please. The fund was authorized by the legislature. It had $4 million attached to it. What we are proposing is that we set aside 10% of those dollars for culturally specific providers to access, at least for a period of time. At some point, we would pool those those resources if they're not completely used. And then setting up a geographic set aside with the remaining $3.6 million in a metro area, non-metro urban areas, and rural areas. These percentages of dollar figures are loosely based upon our current geographic location of PSH property. So that's where those percentages are based on. Yeah, next slide. Thank you. PSH units are designated for individuals and families experiencing chronic homeless, as defined in the local continuum of care organization and referred through established coordinated entry processes. BIPOC individuals and families are overrepresented among those experiencing homeless. And so this is a very important tool in supporting those folks that are overrepresented in the homeless community. OHCS will implement a set aside, as we mentioned before, to assure that CSO-led organizations have access to these resources. And we also wanted to point out, in terms of our equity and racial justice alignment, that PSH Institute developments are eligible for this program and would have received instruction and best practices for fostering equity and inclusion in their PSH properties. Next slide, please. One of the things I think that we heard from council, I think at our last meeting, was that you'd really like us to kind of point out what we've changed and what we didn't change based upon our feedback from you. So based upon our conversation back in November, what we have changed is we've added a set aside specific for CSO-led organizations, and we also added the geographic set aside. And I think that's what we heard from council as a desire. One of the things we didn't do, but we did consider heavily, and that was reducing the 10-year claim window associated with the program. This limits the maximum amount of claims a project can make over a 10-year period. The reason we did this is didn't change this is because this is a new program, and there's a need for resource predictability to ensure that resources can be accessed by all of the projects, or as many as possible anyway. And so because this is a one-time funding and new funding, we want to make sure that everyone has access. If we continue to get funding from the legislature, I think we'll relook at that, understanding that we have more resources available to all of our partners, and therefore could limit that time frame so that it can be more accessible to everyone. So thank you. And so I guess I'm done. Open it up for questions. And if you don't have any, we are suggesting approval of our permanent supported housing risk mitigation pool framework. Thank you.
Hey, Councilmember Farrell.
Yeah, I'm just really excited that this is happening. I think it's a really good thing. And I'm just curious, I'm sure that there's been a lot of feedback from developers around Oregon, and I'm just kind of curious if this is meeting their needs. Have we heard that feedback?
Yeah, I think what we heard is they would like it expanded to cover folks outside of just a PSH, because particularly amongst the housing authorities, I think what we heard is that the acuity level of the folks that they provide assistance to is near PSH levels, but we just don't think that there's enough funding to do that. But in terms of the program itself, yes, we've received a lot of support, a lot of great feedback, and I think folks are really excited about having the ability to access these funds.
Hey, any other council questions, feedback? Well, hearing none, I'm wondering if someone would be ready to advance the motion that's on our screen.
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion from Councilmember Lee. Is there a second, please?
I'll second.
Okay, thanks. Could we now have a roll call, please?
Thank you, Chair Hall. Councilmember Farrell.
Yes.
Chair Hall.
Yes.
Councilmember Lee.
Yes.
Councilmember Mena.
Yes.
Councilmember Harris.
Yes.
Councilmember Meehan.
Yes.
Councilmember Rodriguez.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes.
Okay, thank you, everybody, and we'll keep rolling right along on this segment of our
Great.
agenda. Yeah.
Excellent, thank you. Next up, we have Andrea Mathiasen and Kimye Wayoka, who are here to present the Home America Rescue Plan, Home ARP. homeless housing response and capacity strengthening NOFA recommendations. This was a kind of a different strategy of putting resources out, and so really exciting to see this come through. Hand it off to you, Andrea.
Thanks, Natasha. Andrea Mathiasen. Good morning, Chair Hall, members of the council. As Natasha mentioned, this is a brief update on the homeless housing response and capacity strengthening NOFA and a funding recommendation that we have for your review and approval. This NOFA is the culmination of 2 years of community engagement, HUD review and approval, coming to Housing Stability Council for feedback as we kind of created the framework that this NOFA was based on. Housing Stability Council approved that back in January of 2023, and then the NOFA was issued in September. The NOFA prioritized critical housing needs, particularly in rural communities, for HUD eligible populations that are homeless or at risk of homelessness. Resources were allocated in the NOFA for rental development, as well as to support rural communities in increasing their capacity to coordinate service enriched support and rental assistance to move eligible rental projects forward, particularly with a focus on using home ARP resources for those projects. The NOFA included $33 million of the one-time home ARP dollars. 25 million of those were allocated for the rental development projects, and 8 million of the home ARP dollars were allocated for nonprofit operating resources. The NOFA also included 2 million in general housing account program GHAP capacity building resources for the rural communities to request so that they could develop service enriched housing for eligible populations with an eye for, again, requesting future home ARP development dollars. OHCS received 7 pre-applications and 1 final application for the 25 million in home ARP development dollars. We circled back with the 6 pre-applicants that did not submit final applications, and they ultimately decided that they weren't quite ready for the full-blown development application process. Some of those did actually follow up with a GHAP capacity building application, which Kimye will talk about here shortly. The project that we are bringing forward for your review today was submitted by the Housing Authority of the County of Umatilla. They requested $7.5 million for Liberty Village. It's a 17-unit project located in Hermiston, focusing on veterans at risk of homelessness. The Housing Authority committed 15 project-based rent assistance vouchers to the project, allowing it to be affordable at 30% MFI, 15% of those units affordable at 30%, with the remaining 2 available at 60% MFI. So that leaves $17.5 million of home ARP development dollars that are unallocated through this NOFA. And as OHCS detailed in the NOFA itself, we'll be holding those dollars for a period of 2 years for recipients of the GHAP capacity strengthening dollars, really allowing them to take those capacity strengthening resources to prepare stakeholders, local governments, increase their construction, MWSB kind of networks in order to meet OHCS goals to request home ARP development resources on a first come, first serve basis. Any request made of those $17.5 million in resources would be reviewed against the home ARP funding and NOFA requirements as originally published. And I wanted to say really quickly about the Liberty Village application that is detailed in the memo that you received, and then we can answer any questions about that at the end. And with that, I will just hand it over to Kimye.
Hi, I have notes here, so
Since I haven't met you before, good morning, Chair Hall and members of the council. My name is Kimie Weoka. I am a capacity building analyst for the Affordable Rental Housing Division. I oversee the GHAP capacity building funds that are part of the General Housing Account Program. I'm here to give an update on the capacity strengthening portion of the HomeARP NOFA. Like Andrea said, these particular grant applications are still under review. So today I'm just sharing an overview of the grant. If I may, because I can't help myself and I work in capacity building, I'd like to just take a moment to share some definitions before I start, just to help interpret a few acronyms for those on the call who may not know what some of these things are, and make sure we have a shared understanding of capacity building. If you hear NOFA, NOFA means Notice of Funding Availability. It's the method through which the Affordable Rental Housing Division puts out funding opportunities. When we say GHAP or GHAP-CB, we're talking about the General Housing Account Program and the capacity building funds that are a subset of that. If we say balance of state, it's a term we use to describe the regions of the state that don't have their own home program resources, and they're generally rural and outside of the major metropolitan areas. When we say service-enriched housing, we're talking about affordable rental housing where residents can receive services on-site or by referral through an on-site service coordinator or team. And when this program discusses capacity building, we're talking about any activities and resources that are needed to bring an individual, an organization, or a system to the next level of operational, programmatic, financial, or comprehensive development, so they may more effectively advance our shared goals related to affordable rental housing in Oregon. With that, I will share some information about the capacity strengthening portion of this NOFA. As Andrea said, the division coupled $2 million of capacity building funds alongside the HomeARP development funds within this NOFA. Projects that were ready to apply for development funds were asked to apply along the HomeARP development track. And then applicants who needed more time and resources to bring their region or project idea to readiness were invited to apply along the capacity building track. Given the importance of local partner collaboration in developing and sustaining service-enriched housing, applicants were asked to factor in both regional and community partner capacity building needs in addition to their own organizational capacity building needs. The capacity building funds in this NOFA were made available to nonprofit organizations, federally recognized Native nations and their designated housing entities, housing authorities, and local governments in balance of state regions around Oregon. We received 7 final applications for the NOFA's capacity building grants. And individual grants are expected to range from $150,000 to $225,000. Any remaining reserve funds will be held to provide additional support through this NOFA or through future rounds of the HomeARP NOFA. The applications are currently being reviewed, and we hope to fully fund and provide additional support to all of the applicants that meet the NOFA's threshold requirements. Next slide, please. A few highlights. As Andrea said, the remaining HomeARP development funds will be held for 24 months for these GHAP-CB supported projects arising from this supportive pipeline. The capacity building funds will be building upon capacity building needs that have been identified through local and regional housing planning efforts. So some of those that the state has been funding over the last few years, House Bill 4123 groups, the multi-agency county level groups, local planning groups. These are all examples of some of the work that has been done, foundational planning work that has been done over the last few years that has contributed to these applicants being prepared to move forward with making a project idea a reality. The division has also arranged for the Corporation for Supportive Housing, which runs our Permanent Supportive Housing Institute, to host a small learning cohort for this NOFA on developing and operating service-enriched housing to the project teams that are participating in this NOFA. We're also exploring other networking and training opportunities, and we'll solidify those after speaking with the cohort about what they want and need. And the cohort will be meeting regularly as a group and also individually with OHCS staff as they develop their project plans and progress toward a future home ARP application. I can't discuss specific projects today, but I'm happy to answer any questions that I can. And I'm also happy to return at a future meeting to speak in greater depth with the council about the division's capacity building efforts. And at that, I will turn it back over to Andrea. I believe we have a request. Oh, and questions, right?
Yep. I think we
That's
just
also part of it.
We wanted to solicit any questions that we might be able to answer, and then, yeah, move to
Okay.
consideration of a motion.
Council, you're up, and Councilmember Lee is first on deck.
Hey, Andrea. Hey, Kimmy A. I just have a question about, so we're holding ARP funds for the next 2 years in anticipation of future requests and people being able to move forward. How long can we access those ARP funds? We have some that are expiring, this year. And so I'm just curious, how long do we have actually? Sounds like at least 2 years, right?
The resources have to be fully expended by September of 2030, I believe. So we have some time, but we don't want to cut that too close.
Councilmember Mania.
Thank you, Chair Hall. Hello, Andrea, how you doing?
Thanks.
See you. Just a quick question in terms of the unallocated home ARP funds, and you know what that pool looks like of potential applicants that may be coming back on a first come first served basis?
I think, Kimmy A probably has a clearer understanding of who those recipients are. Where they are geographically is kind of highlighted in the map in the slides. Do you want me to go back to that?
In terms of funds, are we looking at covering the what has been allocated, or there's still going to be some that will be unallocated, even if all those that may potentially come in?
That's a good question. I think, where is my PowerPoint presentation? I'm having technical difficulties. Sorry. I think that it will depend on the dollar amounts requested from those recipients. And I don't have a sense at this point. HUD allows us, and OHCS also in the NOFA, had a policy that we could and would fully fund projects so they didn't have any debt service. And so, as you can see with Liberty Village, the requests for those unallocated resources could be higher than you might think otherwise. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay.
And I just want to, don't know that, anyway, I started talking, so I'll finish my sentence. I think part of what feels really exciting and different about this opportunity that we have structured is to engage in the needed capacity investments in rural communities to put project concepts together, and are holding resources to make sure that when they are able to do that work, the funds come through. And again, focusing on very rural communities where kind of the infrastructure of investments in those functions has not been sufficient. And so I think well, I think we'll learn a lot as we see how these investments work over the next few years and as pivots are needed. In conjunction with our kind of revised application and funding process, I think there'll be some good synergy and ways to incorporate lessons learned.
Okay. Further council questions, feedback, discussion? Okay, this is a decision item, correct? Okay, so just trying to get to this.
And so to be clear, the decision is on the one project recommendation. The capacity resources don't meet the threshold for needing Housing Stability Council approval. We wanted to inform.
Okay.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. Could we get a roll call, please?
Thank you, Chair Hall. Councilmember Farrell.
How to get off mute? Yes.
Thank you. Chair Hall.
Yes.
Councilmember Lee.
Yes.
Councilmember Mena.
Yes.
Councilmember Harris.
Yes.
Councilmember Meehan.
Yes.
Councilmember Rodriguez.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes.
Thanks, everybody. And rolling right along.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Okay, so next up we have Britt McLean, who will be talking about our mixed income statute. We are doing this a tiny bit different than normal in that we are telling you about it and asking for a motion at the same time, if there's comfort there. This is a statutory change that was made in response to barriers in our ability to engage in mixed income developments, where we haven't been able to do so in the past and have had projects unable to move forward as a consequence of the statutory limitations. So Britt will talk through the details of this and what we have considered along with our recommendations. We are asking for a motion now so that we can transition into engagement around rules. How do we do cost attribution? What does that look like? And that is a body of work we wouldn't want to take on until we know that we have council in agreement on the kind of the broader policy umbrella. So with that, Britt, I'll hand it off to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Natasha. Good morning and Happy New Year, Chair Hall, Director Bell, and council members. For the record, my name is Britt McLean, and I'm an operations and policy analyst here in affordable rental housing. I'm here to present options and a staff recommendation for an update to our mixed income development financing statute. I'm here with Mitch Hanoush, our senior operations and policy analyst who co-led this work and the development of the options and the staff recommendation presented today. He's also on hand for questions at the end. I'll start with a high-level overview, then provide some background detail, present our staff recommendation, then give space for members to discuss and ask questions. And then finally, council members will have the opportunity to vote. So let's start with a definition of mixed income housing, the one that is used in Oregon statute. I'll give everybody just a second to read that definition, and then I'll briefly summarize. Essentially, mixed income developments restrict rents on certain units so that tenants within a wider income range can afford to reside within the development. So here is a brief overview of our request for approval today. The statute currently says that OHCS may not finance any affordable units within a mixed income development unless 2/3 of the total units in that development are restricted to tenants making at 120% area median income or below. OHCS was given the authority to reconsider this policy during the 2023 legislative session. House Bill 2761 allows OHCS to expand or reduce the eligibility of mixed income projects for funding consideration, and that is with council approval. Legislative sponsors and advocates of the bill have shown some interest in the agency moving toward expanding its footprint in mixed income developments across the state. OHCS supported this approach. Regardless of how the statute changes, OHCS will continue funding only the affordable rent-restricted units within the mixed income development. We want to be sure that that's very clear. We'll take a look at the options staff explored, and then members will vote on our staff recommendation. So these are the options that we considered. After our research and engagement, we identified what we think are the three most viable options, and then we will talk through our recommendation. The first is simply to raise or lower the current ratio standard for funding. The second, set no ratio standard for funding, allow OHCS to consider funding however many affordable units exist in a particular specific development. Or three, establish a minimum number of unit standard. In this case, that would be 5 units that must be affordable within a development to be considered for OHCS funding. We'll dive in a little bit more here, and a detailed description of the options are outlined in your council packet starting on page 38. So option 1, the alternative minimum ratio standard. Simply put, we would decide whether to require mixed income developments to include more rent restricted units / allow fewer market rate units for funding consideration, or do we want to allow more market rate units / require fewer affordable units in the development in order to be considered for funding. We know that raising or lowering could allow us to have a little bit more leverage to attain specifically policy outcomes. We would just need to reach some consensus on what the priorities would be. And then this option would require a new standard to be determined and then approved by council. Option 2 is a no minimum ratio standard. Just like it sounds, OHCS may consider funding any number of affordable units in a mixed income project. It would probably have fairly broad reach, but with limited resources, we would be concerned that smaller projects could, over time, mean fewer fully affordable developments could be built. And finally, option 3, a minimum number of units, in this case 5, standard. We would, with this option, just establish a minimum number of units within any mixed income development before we would consider that mixed income development for funding. Again, we would only be financing the affordable units within a mixed income development. This would mean more affordable units are built. There's a clear, flexible, simplified approach for our partners and consistency with current policy. Multifamily housing is generally defined as a project with 5 units or more. And as with option 2, limited resources would be a consideration here, but we believe that with the new NOFA process and having a more global view of our full pipeline, we'll be able to maximize opportunities within mixed income developments that are asking for less money and just have a better overall idea of, oh, sorry, I am not, thank you, Mitch, for not, for letting me know, sorry. Let me go to option 3. I just got so caught up in the content, I forgot about my slides, sorry. So we are on option 3 here. Thanks, Mitch. But again, just to reiterate, we think that with our new NOFA process, we'll have a better overall view of the requests and the applications coming in. So we'll be able to manage and maximize our funding to be able to take the most advantage of opportunities within mixed income developments. Thanks, Mitch. Okay, moving the slide now. Okay, our staff recommendation is option 3. After evaluating all of these options, option 3 is what we are recommending to you today. This would mean no minimum ratio of restricted units to non-restricted units for project funding eligibility, but rather we would establish a minimum number within a project that could effectuate a deal. The staff recommendation is a result of conversations, best practices research, alignment with our NOFA process redesign, and an analysis of potential trade-offs within each option. We believe option 3 aligns most effectively with our current policy. It ensures ease of implementation with a minimum unit number for multifamily housing developments. Staff believe this is the best opportunity to achieve some of our shared priorities: more affordable units, a clear process, and then more access to more units in more developments for tenants. This allows developers across the state to include regulated affordable units in a wider range of developments, including projects that may have been exclusively market rate under the restrictions of the current statute. And it enables responsiveness to local market conditions, community priorities, and availability of other funding sources. We believe that this enables response to other funding sources, excuse me. Okay. For our equity and racial justice considerations, staff believe that number 3 is the best opportunity to apply the agency's diversity, equity, and inclusion goals and racial justice commitments to projects, organizations, and partners where previously those opportunities didn't exist before the opportunity to update our statute. OHCS will continue to require affirmative fair market housing plans for all affordable units funded. Our regional MWESB participation goals will be in effect, and other policy objectives specific to the resources that we administer. And as the NOFA redesign process continues, program managers will and staff will determine and figure the best way to apply those commitments and our current current commitments to this new area, these new development partners and these new developments. And with that, we will go to questions and discussion. And I do want to make sure, Mitch, is there anything I missed or anything you'd like to add before we move to discussion and questions?
Oh, that was great, Brett. Nice job.
Thanks, Mitch. Sorry again about the slides.
All right, council, you're up. Councilmember Mania.
Thank you, Chair Hall. Understanding that the recommendation is for option 3, where a minimum number of units being 5 makes sense. It seems that from the staff's perspective. I was intrigued by option number 1, which provides more affordable units based on the percentage of units that really, for example, if there's a market rate development that has 100 units and they want to participate, if there's a percentage that, you said 15% of it or 1/3 is the option, why would we, what is it? And also based on the notes that I read, it would be easy to implement and not more staff time would be needed. Why is that not a better alternative?
I guess in our analysis, sorry, Britt, if you don't mind if I jump in on that. Really, this is about how many projects we can unlock and access affordable units into. So I don't believe that by increasing the ratio required to access OHCS funding, we would increase the number of affordable units. That would require that projects that would otherwise have been not coming in for OHCS funding would now come in for OHCS funding with an increased restriction of units that would otherwise be market rate. So by lowering the standard, we're allowing more affordable units to be accessed by our funding, essentially. We don't feel that raising that standard actually increases the total units in the state. Based on conversations and best practices.
Yeah, I think I think it's not more units with more projects. So the idea of if projects could do 5, 10, 15 units that are affordable, more projects, more market projects might choose to participate, versus if we said you need to do 1/3 of your units affordable, then there would be less participation from market developers. And I think that has been what we have seen and experience. And the projects that were market projects where they wanted to do, a portion of the units, but not a significant majority of them. And so I think that was the consideration, and wanting to, again, retain flexibility more than anything. And I think there's other opportunities to put controls in place regarding some of our resource mixes, but I defer if there's other perspectives.
Councilmember Lee.
Just a quick follow-up and I'll be done.
Oh, I'm sorry.
My perspective is that if a developer chooses to do at least just 5 units, but it doesn't take an extra or less of an incentive to increase the number of units. Now they have to comply anyways, whether it's 5 units or 15 units, whatever that is, they'll have to do exactly the same work in terms of compliance, in terms of that perspective. So that's why I'm not sure that I agree with the recommendation, but I wanted to hear a little bit more.
Okay, Councilmember Lee.
I think Councilmember Meehan was first.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, Councilmember Lee. Thank you for your presentation. I do appreciate that mixed income option, because it definitely it really applies to folks who are looking for affordable housing. The deconcentration of poverty, that's a big deal in my mind. Having access to employment centers and transportation, and sometimes in schools and things, and those things sometimes get overlooked. My question is there a time limit on these affordable units? Again, that's going to be a big theme for me. Is there a cutoff time for how long that these units are affordable, and how long the contract is with the developer or the owners of these projects?
Councilmember, it sounds like you're asking about the affordability period. Is that right? I believe and Natasha or Mitch, please chime in here, but I think it would depend on the funding source that would determine the affordability period. So however the affordable units within a mixed income development were to be funded, those provisions would apply to the income level and the length of the affordability period. Is that right, Natasha? Just want to make sure.
Yes, yeah, that sounds right.
Thank you for the question.
Right, Councilmember Lee.
Thank you, Chair Hall, and thanks for the presentation. I really appreciated how clear and easy it was to follow. So thank you for that. I think am somewhat following the lines that Councilmember Mena is raising. I'm not sure 3 makes better sense to me than some version of 1. And, I think about, well, if a multifamily definition is at least 5 units, in some cases, you're going to have 100% of the units having to fall under our guidelines. And if it is indeed 100-unit community and we only have 5, is there anything we're gaining there in terms of number or participation or any of our other targets? So there's something interesting to me about setting a percentage. I can hear that 2/3 is way too many. 5 seems way too little. So is there a way that we can both leverage additional participation on the part of market rate developers to rent to people with living on a lower income? And I'm saying all those words together in somewhat of a skeptical or a skeptical tone of voice. Like, why are we doing that? I mean, I know that we are all better when we live in communities that are diverse. On varieties of dimensions, race and ethnicity, gender, income, country of origin, et cetera, et cetera. And I think this is a part of the research you referenced in the briefing memo, but I'm just not sure we're there yet. So I support the intentionality and the direction of this. I think it makes a lot of sense. I also support that we've had perhaps too high of a percentage expectation, but coming to the hard 5 doesn't seem to make sense to me yet, although it's not a deal breaker. And then, so that's my first comment. My second comment is around racial justice and equity. You have made the argument that we will now require these new projects to comply with the basic standard we have now, and that as we consider more expectations on the part of those who are receiving public funding, that these projects will be liable for that. And I just want to make sure that we're really clear that they know this up front, because we've had a number of discussions over the years about, well, this project came in before we had this expectation, so we can't hold them to it. And this project came in after we did this, so we can't hold them to it. So I get that those things are still in development. I appreciate that, but I don't want to find ourselves a year from now saying, well, we couldn't do this because they're not liable because we didn't have it in that moment. And I would love to see some reflection of how this fits into the statewide housing plan priorities. I think there are racial justice priorities there. I think there are other policy agendas there. And I'm thinking about the statewide housing plan, particularly as I think about what are we quote unquote holding this new cohort of market rate developers in order to access the public resources we're about to give them, because it meets our agenda, not necessarily meets theirs, right? A market rate developer is market rate developer. They're looking for the biggest return on their investment. We are looking for other things, and I just want to make sure that we dance with the right people in the right way. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Lee. Councilmember Harris.
Thank you for this presentation. I'm still trying to process all of it, so trying to figure out how to phrase this in a way that makes sense. So apologies if you already mentioned this or if it does not exactly make sense. But I'm curious, for the percentage route, or I guess either any of the options within the rent restricted units, is there a determination for the unit types within that and what those are based on? Because I suppose if it's not based on percentage of overall units and the minimum number is 5, within that 5 units, would that then be broken out based on unit types within the building? Just to make sure that you have a diverse set of unit types within the rent restricted options.
Thank you, Councilmember. Great question. I think the same answer would apply. Natasha, Mitch, please correct me if I'm wrong, that it would be resource specific if there were target income bands or number of rooms. Is sort of room number, is that a dimension of what you're referring to, Councilmember?
Yeah, exactly.
For unit types, right? I believe a part of that would be partially dependent on the resource type, but Natasha, Mitch, please correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I think that sounds right, Britt. I think functionally we would identify unit types with associated restrictions. And so if those units upon turnover are used differently, or, anyway, those would be, so that if we're saying it's, 5 2-bedroom units, that's what would be ongoing tracked for monitoring.
Yeah, I think the key is this is really just a regulation, a rule that we are opening up to kind of a greater number of types of projects, not a program. So anybody that was still receiving OHCS funding would have to come in for one of our programs and meet the standards and expectations of those existing funding sources and programs that we have, as well as all of the standards that are being established in this new process. So this would allow someone potentially who meets that minimum standard to come in for funding that might not otherwise be eligible for state funding, and then hold them accountable to those requirements of the state funding program that they were applying for. But this regulation in and of itself isn't doing all of the different things that funding programs do. It's just kind of opening up those options.
Yeah, and I think just to round this up, I know that we're woefully going to be behind time today, given that we have other agenda items ahead of us. I think that that I will accept all of what this discussion today as input, and that we will round back with additional information and a recommendation based on this input from Housing Stability Council. Great. And so I guess, Chair Hall, before we move forward, unless there's other comments, I think we are good to move forward.
One last call for council comments. Okay, not hearing or seeing anything, I believe we can move on.
Great. Thank you so much, Britt and Mitch. And Mitch will now do an introduction of our construction loan guarantee resources, which was a new legislative investment.
Great, sorry. Always a little bit of dancing to get the screen back. Good morning. I think it's still morning. Council members, Chair Hall, for the record, Mitch Hanoush, Senior Policy Analyst with the Affordable Rental Housing Division. And just going to give you a brief introduction. I'll try to move quickly on the construction loan guarantee program and funding that we received in the last legislative session, and kind of the RFA process and what our expectations are around that. So we received $20 million through the last legislative session, specifically to pass through to a nonprofit community development financial institution in order to establish a fund, and that fund would be used to provide loan guarantees, specifically construction loan guarantees. A loan guarantee is a really powerful tool in affordable housing, especially. It allows kind of smaller nonprofits, smaller developers, emerging developers, a lot of culturally specific organizations who've historically had a great disadvantage in seeking construction debt to provide more, give them some insurance policy, essentially, that allows lenders to feel more confident in providing loans to them. It can really unlock a lot of market opportunities without a significant amount of investment, hopefully. Ideally, in a perfect state, the loan guarantee is really just that insurance policy and doesn't actually even need to be called. So it's in a fund that folks can use as a surety for lenders, and the impact can be really great because oftentimes those guarantees don't need to be called and then can be reused and repurposed. It was a deliberate strategy by the legislature to support development right now, specifically in this market. Given the volatile conditions, we're hearing from a lot of developers that they're having trouble accessing and securing debt, specifically for construction loans. And by providing this loan guarantee, the hope is that it will unlock potential loans that otherwise might not be provided to developers, but also potentially lower interest rates by providing more surety of repayment for folks accessing the loan. So in order to kind of pass this funding through, we will be doing a request for applications. We're working with our procurement team already on putting that together and starting to work with Department of Justice on what that will look like. I'll go through some of the timelines later, but that will be kind of our process for procuring a CDFI to administer and implement this fund and program. So I'm just going to go through some of the requirements that we're planning to put into the RFA. I will say we are trying to leave at least some of the programmatic structure and how the fund will be structured pretty open-ended, so that folks who are responding can tell us how they can kind of do the greatest work with the amount of funding that we're offering. Tell us what they can do with it, and then we will score them competitively and award the person that we feel is going to be able to do the most effective job and meet both statutory requirements and also our agency standards and expectations. So just as I mentioned, this has to be made as a grant to one or more nonprofit community development financial institutions who will then use this $20 million to develop a fund. And that fund must be used to provide guarantees for construction loans. This is very specifically calling out construction loans. OHCS has another program for permanent loan guarantees that is just relaunching, and we're really excited about potential for working collaboratively with this eventual product, but it is distinct from that. So our perm loan guarantee program potentially could be utilized at construction loan conversion, but this would be for those construction loans specifically and is required to be through the bill language. The loans being guaranteed have to be for projects restricted to low or moderate income households, which was defined in statute as up to 120% AMI. And the guarantee terms may not exceed 5 years. So those were the kind of requirements given in the bill language. We also are adding specific requirements that the CDFIs must respond to. And then again, we will be competitively scoring how well they respond to these and prioritizing those organizations that do kind of the best job. I will say this is sort of what we're looking at as the meat of the RFA. And so for CDFIs listening, this is where we really want to see some creativity and some of like kind of how you're planning to push this work forward in a meaningful way. I think this is really where CDFIs will be able to differentiate themselves, especially on these kind of more ERJ related criteria. So yeah, excited to hear that. We'll also be doing some level of training or webinar that we will further explain any questions to CDFIs that might have them after the RFA gets released. So first, there will be a requirement that the fund and the program prioritizes and or differentiates guarantees for loans to small, rural, and culturally specific organizations, thinking about things like preferential loan terms for specifically culturally specific organizations and or rural organizations, thinking about setting aside parts of these of this $20 million specifically for these organizations and then directly targeting those organizations, working with community partners to secure extra resources that can be used with these guarantees for those resources, carving out their own internal resources to connect with the guarantee. I think there's a lot of really creative strategies that folks can come up with around this, and we're excited to see what we hear back. But we are requiring that this as a minimum expectation be met. Similarly, we're asking folks to identify themselves what these historic disparities in lending practices are that they've seen from their perspective as a lending institution, which I think allows them to sort of confront their own role in sort of some of the disparities that exist, and then think about how they could use a restorative justice lens through this financial product specifically to work to address some of those historic disparities. I think really wanting to just confront some of the issues that folks see in the marketplace and some of the ways that this guarantee can be used in a really equitable manner is exciting. And I think that there's potentially going to be a lot of interesting perspectives given here. And again, this will be competitively scored by who's able to identify and address this in what OHCS deems the most impactful manner. Lastly, and sort of in a similar vein to what Britt just went over with sort of the mixed income statute, we're hoping that this fund will be able to support projects that are leveraging other agency resources so that our other programmatic requirements will be attached to these projects. It was legislative intent to allow these funds to go up to 120% AMI for the guarantees that they're being provided. So that is absolutely possible and is a key part of the market that this will be able to support. But we do want to see how they will be able to support folks accessing other public resources as well, and try to prioritize and leverage our other funding through this guarantee program so that other kind of agency programmatic requirements like affirmative fair housing marketing, MWSB requirements, other kind of key standards that we've established are going to have to be met. In addition to those three other requirements we're including would be to provide options for the guarantee to be utilized in a manner that would continue, allow the project to continue moving forward. This, I think, is really critical. If kind of wonky, I think we want to know how exactly these funds are going to be distributed and how they can be proactive about it in a way that allows, isn't just the project failed and so we're repaying the bank. I think we want to be able to try to get in early with these funds in a way that actually saves the project, not that is just sort of just being used as a guarantee. This is, I think, a lot trickier with a construction loan guarantee than it is with a perm loan guarantee, but really hoping to see some creative ideas here that would allow projects to continue moving forward so we don't lose the potential affordable units. We also want to, similar to connecting to our programs, but just generally want to see how they will prioritize guarantees for loans that have projects with lower AMI targets. So we do want to reiterate that we do want to see lower AMI targets with this fund. We know that the greater the affordability, the harder it can be to secure loans because you have less rental income coming in. And so in order to help those projects in an equitable manner, we want them to be targeted specifically for these resources and these guarantees. And lastly, emphasizing feasibility, longevity, and productivity, which are all really fluffy terms. Generally thinking about sustainability of the resource. So how are these funds being offered in a way that allows this to kind of have the greatest bang for your buck, provide the most support to the folks that need it the most, and sort of connecting to other resources that folks have. And how are you going to support these loans being guaranteed in a way that allows projects to move forward and not need to access the entire guarantee amount in as many cases as possible. So timeline, as I mentioned, we're already drafting. Our procurement team has been excellent. They are moving quickly on this, which is really exciting. We're hoping that we'll be able to release. This is a pretty conservative timeline, but I prefer conservative timelines often, especially with kind of all the parties involved. So I think this is pretty realistic, getting this RFA out in Q1, allowing folks to respond in the following month or two, and then scoring after that, trying to get a quick turnaround so that we can have a grant agreement early Q3 this year, award the funding, and then have the CDFI be able to hopefully be standing this up by Q3 of this year and making guarantees shortly thereafter. And that's what I've got. Any questions or thoughts or concerns?
Okay, Councilmember Mena.
Thank you, Chair Hall. The only thing I have is I just want to commend the staff on great work. I think that this is a great tool, and the partnerships I think are going to be helpful. And I know that the last item I think a little across a little harsh, but it is great work that the staff is doing and really appreciate. I know that there's a lot of movement going on, especially with the direction of the governor and the need for housing. So really appreciate all the work that you do, and I think this is a great product. Thank you.
Anybody else? Councilmember Lee.
Thank you, Chair Hall. Thanks, Mitch and everyone for the presentation. I will second my colleagues' comments about this is wonderful work, and I'm so pleased about it. I have one comment and then a question. Because it's a guarantee, right? It's not simply the access or the support or the long-term loan kind of thing. I feel like everything we fund under this project should be the best ideal of our values and the statewide housing plan and our targets possible, not simply projects that are good enough. Right? In this moment, I think we want the best that we can have, which again is not perfection. But in lots of other places, I feel like good enough is good enough. We should not be sacrificing that in pursuit of the excellence, right? As they say. In this case, I think these projects who are accessing these programs should be the shining examples because of the guarantee of support. And then my question is very appreciative of the articulation of how you're going to center racial justice and equity, and that is still in development, which is great. I think we're going to learn some things that might be really helpful for the other NOFA conversations that are going on, and how do we implement the overall conversation about how do we implement racial justice and equity across the organization. How are we going to reflect the fact that these manifestations or examples of racial justice and equity commitment and work in the RFA, and probably more importantly in the rating scores, in the rating sheets in that rubric, if we don't yet know exactly how we're going to find evidence or accept as evidence the organization and the project meet our goals. So I'd love to hear a little reflection on that, because I appreciate the urgency in which this timeline is moving forward.
Yeah, I think it's a really good question, because you're right. We are actively developing our general funding processes. I guess in terms of how we're judging the CDFIs that are going to be applying for the RFA, we are going to be using kind of these distinct criteria that we're putting into the RFA itself. And I do hope that we're able to sort of see what the lending community is able to do around a fund specifically for a guarantee, because it is sort of this, as you mentioned, it's a powerful tool, but it is sort of off on its own. It's not actual dollars that are being given to a project necessarily. It's more to unlock market opportunities. And yeah, so I think in terms of how we're evaluating these, it really is just the criteria that we're putting into this RFA, as opposed to sort of some of the criteria that we're looking at in our NOFA processes. That doesn't mean they're mutually exclusive. I think there will be some overlap, in terms of how we're evaluating individual projects and how we're going to evaluate what the CDFIs are saying they're going to be looking at. We want to be looking at similar things. But as you mentioned, we haven't officially nailed down exactly what those criteria are in our NOFA. So I think leaving it open-ended in terms of what CDFIs reply to us allows us to evaluate kind of at a higher level. I think we're still going to be able to see the stronger applications that come in through this RFA in terms of these responses, but are going to be allowing them to tell us essentially what they're able to do and how they're able to create the most impact for tenants.
Yeah, and I think like a distinction here, Councilmember Lee, is that our RFA is for CDFIs, not properties. And so I think what we get to see through a CDFI application is what is their proposal? And so how are they going to evaluate investments, ensure alignment with equity and racial justice? And then, you know, on our side of the funding strategy, when we're putting our resources in, we'll be also establishing those measures and controls. And if a CDFI is proposing having strong rigor and oversight and understanding of, you know, how they see equity and racial justice impacts that resonate with our identified goals, I think that's what the intent of the RFA scoring process is, to elevate those that really have effective strategies and let us choose not the CDFI that says we're just going to have them check these boxes. And so I think that's where the positionality feels a little bit different in this type of delivery, because we're asking to hear from them what their strategy is. And we're saying these are the things that matter to us when you are putting that together. And I think, as Mitch is saying, equity and racial justice being fundamental to that, as is the idea that we want to be able to support projects with construction loan guarantees that would have lesser other access to capital to offset the demands of the current interest rate market. I think, you know, as we have talked over, I guess, over the years now about cost challenges and drivers and projects, interest rates is fundamental among them. Construction interest rates is an incredibly challenging environment now, as is the ability, you know, kind of the impact of projects when they're unable to get you know, lower interest rate construction loans, when they have volatile interest rates, and when it's challenging to transition from a construction loan to a permanent loan. So I think this is one of those pieces, and it will be really important for that to be really well and intentionally owned. And that's what the RFA will let us find, who is going to really create a structure around that that is aligned with both great projects and great developers doing the work that is tenant-centered and aligned with equity and racial justice.
Right. Yeah, I appreciate that clarification. And I like the fact that we're going to, you know, say what we care about and ask people to tell us how they respond and align with what we care about. I also know that it's very difficult, particularly when you're a mainstream focused agency, to or organization. Sorry, I keep talking about it as if it's a project. I understand it's not. Or organization, to actually show up with some specificity if we haven't offered some specificity about how might they show us evidence of their alignment with our values. And so if we can think both and of let's be exploratory and hear what we hear and go through here, that's going to give us some breadcrumbs about where to go. And if there's anything specific we could offer, for instance, we're looking for information that shows X, Y, and Z. And I think the REIT process might have some, you know, reflective questions or prompts that could also be in here. And again, I know it's not now check this box, check this box. None of us wants that. And I don't want to be in a situation of people saying, well, we just couldn't know, or we just couldn't understand how we could meet this incredibly onerous and unreasonable expectation related to racial justice and equity. So I think this is great. I'm really excited to see what we're going to learn. And I want us to be intentional about some of the experiences we've had in the past related to racial justice and equity and affordable housing finance. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else on the council wish to be heard on this? Councilmember Meehan.
I also want to reiterate the excitement for the project that this offer for this type of project. And I'm curious, so is the offer for informational workshops or is it really like a training? And I guess that's kind of echoing, Councilmember Lee's. Are we going to be intentional about putting out what you're looking for? Is it mandatory or is it something that they can opt to do? That kind of thing. I'm just curious.
Yeah, I think so. Once the RFA is launched, we will have a not mandatory, but an informational pre-proposal webinar where folks who are interested and have questions can come and attend. And in terms of the loan guarantee product itself, I think we will be looking for folks who have strong marketing plans and outreach strategies for how they will be distributing the guarantees and how they will find organizations that need the guarantees. So I think from our perspective, it's really marketing to the CDFIs and letting them know this is available and what our expectations are. And we plan to do that through, technical advisories and this webinar and hopefully through some targeted outreach that we're able to do once the RFA is released. And then from the CDFI perspective, we will be looking at we will ask them to be looking at with the individual projects how they can do a robust outreach strategy to organizations that might need this type of guarantee, and working with other lenders too might be interested in the product themselves too. I hope that answers your question.
It does. Thank you so much.
Okay. Any other council feedback, questions, comments? All right, then you have the input, the direction you're looking for as staff?
Yes, I
Okay.
think so. Thank you all.
Yeah.
Okay. Very good. Thanks, everybody. And I guess we're heading into the home stretch, folks.
Yes, indeed. And saved a simple topic for the last. So I think I'm going to pick us up on our kind of monthly cadence of talking about funding processes and redesign. Going to focus first on where we are in some level setting, and then we will dig in a bit on our engagement, and I'll have Kim Travis provide some good detailed analysis and next steps around engagement. So wanted for this part on the actual funding process itself, we are right now in this place of transitioning between input. We did a lot of input. You will see details on that over the past many months. And we are looking to transition from that into formulating recommendations. We are kicking that off here. I think I'll start with just this quick reflection on our future process, which we have talked about in this space a couple times already. The idea of breaking apart what is right now a concentrated NOFA process, evaluating all things at one moment in time and locking projects in, to a version of a deconstructed process where we are getting information and connections to projects early, providing technical assistance and guidance, and then evaluating components on a basis to work in alignment with hopefully a little bit more natural schedule of their development project. Based on council input to date, we have changed the order of that evaluation. We have brought the impact assessment earlier. I think equity and racial justice evaluation happens at all places and stages, but that is a really critical early point of analysis where we want to make sure to have that embedded and delivered through, then transitioning into details of financial and pro forma, and then finally project commitment stage. with conditional commitments earlier than that, but that final funding commitment happening a bit later than we do now, so that projects are able to move forward, and that we have more confidence in the details and the diligence that has been done by that point in the project development process. Currently, our work internally within the division, we are building new teams. We have created a new application team under now our resources section. We are building a new pipeline team under our now production section. And that is where our technical advisors will be situated, as well as where pre-development and other really early touch points and relationship managers will live, to be able to make sure that everybody has someone to call that is specifically charged with talking to them about their projects. We have created a new operations section, standing up a new data team within that group. We have always used data systems. We have never staffed those systems deliberately internally. And so the idea to be able to have a lot more hands to make sure that our systems are set up well, everyone are users, but we really need to have that as a deliberate body of work to make sure that we can really drive with information and data informed decisions. Our IT department is still involved. Our research section for the agency is still involved. But this is really around this other piece of business, which I think we all identified and understood needed to have hands to it. We have also, I think I've referenced this before, we also stood up an initiative team within our planning and policy group to have kind of high level leaders on key initiatives that we are charging forward with, to make sure that we are both tracking what's going on in the state, making sure our projects or our programs are informed by best practices, but also engaging across state agencies, engaging nationally to make sure that we are staying current and staying engaged in all of the needed conversations to make sure we're building in all lessons learned and opportunities for maximizing impact. Again, I said signal that we're switching from input to trying to put recommendations together. We understand this deconstructed concept and the stages of evaluation. So now we have teams digging into what are the details of that? What are the weeds that guide that? What are the evaluation components? What are the benchmarks that we want to put in place to make sure that we have, again, we're going to lead with a partnership and a collaboration perspective and a strong accountability perspective. And so wanting to have benchmarks that allow us to have clear accountability and clear expectations for everyone that is accessing resources. And we're working to build the recommendations, both that need to be informed by Housing Stability Council, as well as those that will eventually get a vote from Housing Stability Council for adoption. What I'm sharing here is a first iteration of a funding calendar. So this is something absolutely that folks are really eager to understand. They say, we have told you a lot of things. What's the money and when is it available? And then what does it look like? And so those are really big, weighty questions. We want to put together a funding calendar through the centralized application process that also use the same spirit and the same goal of being collaborative partners, wanting to make sure that we have clarity around what is available, how you can access them, what our requirements are, not tying specific, establishing thresholds and requirements, expectations for all resources. So one resource shouldn't require more equity and racial justice than another. They should all have the same fundamental performance bar, not a low bar, a clear, consistent, measurable bar. Getting it to be measurable is always a challenge, I will acknowledge. So I want to use the standard-based evaluation. We want to look at resources holistically. So instead of saying you need to have $5 of this resources and $5 of that resources and $5 of that, let's say you need to have $15 of whichever kind of resource is the best fit. And so wanting to think about the resources again as centralized, not on a flavor by flavor basis. This is a transition and this is significant change, both for us internally, but certainly also for our development community. So looking at these resources as a whole, we want to put into place set-aside concepts. As I've talked with you over many months, it felt really clear that our set-asides need to be put in place to protect access. So not to limit access to only X%, but to make sure that there are resources that are held to protect access, so notably to culturally specific and or nonprofit organizations, to make sure that there are resources that can be accessed. And it could be more than that, but in recommending as a first draft here, a 25% set aside for those organizations. And to be clear, I guess I didn't mention earlier, this is not information that has been shared and that I've gotten direct input from yet. So that's the next step. I'm bringing it here first. And the next step is to get stakeholder input and feedback on this so that we can inform a recommendation back to Housing Stability Council. But I wanted to preview it here now. And so again, putting into place a 25% set aside and then distributing the resources broadly based on the total needs identified through the Oregon Housing Needs Analysis. So separating those out, the regions pictured in the map there are the ONA regions. When we looked at the data, dug into that, there's dividing the resource pool by that many buckets makes the buckets too small. And so have put a proposal here forward to look at Portland metro counties and then the western counties and the eastern counties. Again, this is something that we need input on or feedback about, but it is so that's a strategy for thinking, again, not wanting to slice things too finely, but wanting to make sure that we are holding attribution of geography. And so I think those were two really critical pieces that was flagged through Housing Stability Council. We need to make sure that we're covering the state, and we need to make sure that our culturally specific and nonprofit organizations retain access to resources. In terms of the resources, unlike previous strategies where we are doing a dozen different NOFAs in a year, where we are saying this money is released here, this money is released then, etc. Instead, we're saying this is all of the resources that we will be opening when we open our doors in April. We want to have these resources available. We will do best fit analysis for individual projects and make sure to move those forward. So it includes general development capital. And so that's both our LIFT resources and our federal home resources, permanent supportive housing resources, which is funded through state investment in PSH through Article 11Q bonds, as well as our National Housing Trust Fund resources, which are dedicated to serve 30% AMI and below. Preservation dedicated resources, the legislature allocated $50 million in legislative resources to support preservation. So 40 million of that we're recommending to provide broad preservation funding. 5 million of that would be moved to support manufactured park preservation. And then, as you see kind of down at the bottom, portfolio stabilization, which is something that we've talked a while back about. I should do a refresher on, but being able to use some of that preservation resources to support portfolio projects in financial or other distress that need some, are working with our asset management group, and we need to make sure that we have tools in that toolkit. We are recommending $30 million for tribal dedicated resources. It is, and that is specifically, I guess I'm not strategizing that as a set aside and establishing that as an eligible use for those resources in this strategy recommendation, knowing that Article 11 Q bonds as Oregon constitutional resources as we understand it at this moment in time, need to be spent in the state of Oregon, and sovereign territories are likely not meeting that threshold. And so wanting to make sure that we hold and protect resources to make sure that we can engage in development on tribal trust land. Veteran dedicated capital is a statutory set aside of our general housing account program. And then a new legislative investment in $10 million in agricultural workforce housing. We are not offering federal low-income housing tax credits in year one. That's because we don't have them to offer. We do have our ag worker housing tax credit resources and our Oregon affordable housing tax credit resources. I'm flagging here at the bottom that I do think it will be prudent for us to name $1 to put towards addressing gaps in projects that are currently already in our production pipeline. And I say that as we have talked about over, again, the years, that we are triaging and problem solving, and doing so without understood resources makes the problem harder. And so I want to have clarity around how we would want to use those resources, what the controls and the bounds are. And I think we need to put $1 there. And so I'm leaving it TBD because I want to define all of those pieces before we reference dollars that are put towards there. So we'll continue to provide more information around that. And then moving into when we open again, hopefully in April. And then in 2025, I guess after we open in April, we will transition into engaging in the qualified allocation plan to incorporate our federal low-income housing tax credits into this revised application structure. And anything that's not been used from the 2024 resources will roll into 2025. We will add some additional resources to be paired with tax credits as we are able to add them into our offering. This is, again, the first time that this is being previewed. Next, we are working on an announcement to go out next week that will go out to all of our development stakeholders to give opportunity and ways to give feedback on that. So we'll continue to incorporate and track input and engagement around that. I think our next focus of recommendations will likely look towards subsidy limits and those development benchmarks that I was referencing earlier. As I've referenced a couple times, we have a goal of launching our centralized application in 2024. All of those pieces are coming together, and it is a really significant lift. And so I think just want to acknowledge that and say that we want to make sure that we are doing this well. And I think that means both really considering and building on the input that we have gotten and that we continue to get, and also providing significant embedding into our process measures for success that we are continuing to evaluate and continuing to accept input on as we face challenges. And I think I will just transition us right into the conversation with Kim Travis, because I think a lot of that will feed how are we approaching and directing in engagement both now as well as into the future. And so I think if we can go into that conversation, and then we'll loop back on all of it. So I think then, Kim, I will hand it off to you. Kim is probably a familiar face to many of you. She has been I'd say a long time engagement and lead with the agency. Kim's position is new within our affordable rental housing division, based on the executive order and our need to work through this extensive change. Being able to bring her to lead our have an actual engagement strategy around these programmatic components, and many more that you will hear about today, and add additional capacity to implement. So Kim, I'll hand it off to you.
Great, thank you. Chair Hall, members of the council. My name is Kim Travis. I'm an engagement coordinator in the Affordable Rental Housing Division. Appreciate the opportunity to talk with you today. I know we're over time, so thanks for sticking around for this topic. We've got a few slides here. I think we've got 6 slides, and then we're gonna open it up for discussion. First, starting with a quick overview of the 2023 resource and funding engagement that we wrapped up in November. We will be giving you a reference. We've posted on our website a summary of that engagement, so you'll get that here today. I'm just going to highlight a few key elements of that engagement series. Essentially, we hosted 6 2-hour Zoom sessions over that time period, August to November, and then several additional meetings with stakeholders to raise awareness of the process and to make sure that we're showing up in spaces where our stakeholders are already gathering. So we convened, and then we also attended these additional meetings with stakeholder groups listed here, really trying to focus on culturally specific organizations, tribal organizations, to bolster relationships with these groups. And we will continue with this focus for long-term relationship building and to hold us accountable to making sure we're elevating their voices and their experiences as we make decisions. So go to the next slide here, where this is really just a snapshot of participation data that we collected over that process. And I'll share a little bit about just some of the methods that we use. So we did send out meeting notices using the Affordable Rental Housing Technical Advisory List. For each of the meetings, we posted discussion documents on the Monday before the meeting. The meetings were held every other Thursday morning. And the discussion documents, we were trying to be brief. There's a lot of content here in the 14 key topics that we covered. They're about 1 to 2 pages long, and we did identify 3 to 5 specific questions that we were looking for input on with respect to those particular topics. So on average, we had about 100 attendees at every session. When technology cooperated, we were able to go into smaller virtual breakout rooms. We did have a few hiccups with technology, but overall, we really had amazing participation at these meetings, and input was collected through a tool called Easy Retro. So you can see here, we were able to analyze how many responses we generated, how much input we generated for each topic. And I'll say we did a post engagement evaluation, and most stakeholders said that they liked using that tool and felt that there were productive breakout sessions on these topics. So we feel really good about that. Also, we did post recordings of all the meetings and the breakout rooms, and provided surveys so that people who were not able to attend, or if people wanted more time to respond to these questions, they were able to do a post-meeting survey to provide input on those same sets of questions that we were asking live in the meetings. So just wanted to provide just this general snapshot here about some of the data that we collected about that engagement series. I'm going to turn it back over to Natasha to just cover a few things, a few key things about what we heard, and then I'll come back and talk about next steps for 2024 engagement planning.
Needed to unmute. Thanks, Kim. So I think I've keep referencing engagement and all of the input we have received through all of this work. Significant input and significant, really impactful discussions. I think what's signaled in those statistics that Kim shared is, how many of those input cards were filled out. There's also all of the really incredible conversations that were had in those spaces, which was also input. And I think I've shared over several months a lot of the input that we have received around needing to have predictability, needing to have early surety and around the access to resources so that they can continue to do investments and get partners engaged, involved, and prioritizing projects to move their work forward. I think, fundamentally, this is a really significant body of work and body of change. And I think, as you'll see, as I will follow up with the link, but it's posted on the Housing Stability Council page, as well as our engagement page, the synthesis of input. And just, acknowledging that this was asking for a lot of input without turning back immediately with the recommendation. And I think, and that was intentional. And I think the intentionality is because all of these pieces, we engaged on some 14 different really big topic areas, and they're all interconnected. And so we couldn't solve one thing at a time, and really wanted to hear and dig in on each of those so that we could bring them all together as a package. And so I think, we've tried to do a lot of feedback and iteration. And what we need to now do is deliver to the recommendations, make sure that we have opportunity for feedback on the recommendations, and want to make sure that as we are reflecting back to stakeholders, these are all of the things that we heard through all of these different means of collecting information, also including how are we responding to them. I think another critical piece, I talked about the new teams that we are standing up internally. We are also engaged with a change management contractor to make sure that we are keeping mind internally as we are doing all of this work. What are our internal processes? How are we establishing clear roles, responsibilities, expectations? So really wanting to make sure that we are launching this on a strong foundation, and one that will be resilient and supportive of both the change, but also aligning our practices to best meet the moment and to best meet our goals of expanding housing to meet tenant needs. And so so all of that is still going on, and I think I'll turn it back to you, Kim.
All right, so where we are currently, we're working to map out key meetings upcoming in 2024, and we want to make sure we're communicating effectively, both providing information and then receiving information back. So we want to make sure we're maximizing existing meetings that are convened by OHCS and convened by our partners. Just for example, the Oregon Housing Authorities meet quarterly, and making sure that we're tracking those meetings and we're planning and engaging for maximizing participation in those spaces, along with meetings that are convened by Housing Oregon. And we want to invest more time with public funders, including, as Natasha mentioned, we will have our new technical advisors and new teams that we want to be introducing and building relationships there. And so over the next few months, we plan to be talking with stakeholders about an engagement plan, really, asking some basic questions just to get their input about how they want to be engaging with OHCS. And we do expect that a plan will be in draft form, working draft form for quite some time, as we continue to kind of vet and make sure that we're building out a plan that meets the needs of our stakeholders. So these are some of the things that we're working on. Natasha mentioned the internal business process work. That's very exciting. And we do have a great team that really values stakeholder engagement. There's a lot of engagement happening. As you heard today, pretty much all of the agenda items that we discussed were informed by stakeholder engagement. So having a plan will really just elevate some of that existing work and have a framework that that all of that work can fit within. And we do, part of our goal here is that a plan where stakeholders will be able to plug in efficiently over the busy year ahead, and they can maximize their time in terms of plugging in with the issues that matter most to them. So with this engagement plan, we know we will be learning as we go, and plan to provide an opportunity for evaluation at the end of the year and reflection to make improvements for 2025 engagement. Next slide. All right, so this is a work in progress. As I mentioned, we're still collecting all the things that we know about. So this is not a final list by any means, just to give you a sense of the big topics that are out there. In addition, we know there will be engagement related to legislative planning. And as we heard earlier, there's rulemaking on lots of programs, including the mixed income statute, which we discussed earlier. So we just really want to have all of these opportunities clearly identified. We want to be clear about rulemaking and rulemaking advisory committees to ensure transparency. Again, because we know it's difficult for stakeholders to track all of these moving parts and pieces and really plug in to what's most meaningful for their interests. And then I think with that, I'm going to just highlight that first bullet, which is a huge piece of our engagement plan, is finalizing and launching that centralized funding application process. And we have some initial ideas about a testing group concept. So I want to turn it back over to Natasha to kind of run through where we're at with that.
Great, thank you. And so the idea of, we're doing big system change, can we test it before we start it? Was something that was a conversation I had with several development partners throughout engagement, and also came up through Housing Stability Council discussions. So I think appreciation, I think having a way to do some beta testing is going to make kind of build a lot of confidence that not that we'll get it perfect, but that we have tried to identify unintended consequences to the greatest degree possible. And so I think we are still fine-tuning the strategies. We know that the need to do this is really soon, because we are hoping to open in April for the broader development community, but are looking at some initial concepts to begin doing that as we get to the clarity on those benchmarks and those considerations for each of our stages. And so, meaning we're not ready to do it today, but we are planning to do it, looking at specifically wanting to make sure engaged in that test are public funders, nonprofit and culturally specific development partners in both urban and rural areas of the state, public and tribal housing authorities, lenders, NOAA in particular, and investors. So wanting to make sure that as we are thinking about testing functions of this revised process, that we are creating engagement with and roles for each of those identified partners through that process. And I think as we are finalizing that concept, we'll make sure to be informing Housing Stability Council both of the strategy as well as what we are learning as we engage in that work.
Great. And I think next we just have, open it up for discussion. We've posed some questions, but certainly open to any input that you have for us on this topic.
All right, Council. Gosh. We run out of steam? Okay, Councilmember Lee. I know you were waiting for
Never, Chair Hall, never.
I know. I'm just teasing. Go take it away.
It's a force for good and maybe not, right? So wow. So thrilled, so excited, so much respect for both the way in which the work is being approached and conceptualized, and for the work itself, which I know is voluminous. And I think truer words were never spoken than, Natasha, when you said, or somebody said, you can't tear this apart and do one section by one section. Actually, we have to look holistically at all the different parts. And yes. A couple of comments. I loved in one of the later slides, this non-transactional relationship building. that's it. We have to have relationships with each other that aren't based solely in the transactions for all the times where our behavior isn't going to be the best, our partner's behavior isn't going to be the best, the environment, the lending environment, the construction, right, is not going to be the best. And if we're building something that's bigger than ourselves and bigger than the, our stated charge to get money out the door, it's got to be based in non-transactional relationships. So super appreciated that. I want to go back to Natasha, where you started before we went into the engagement piece of it. Thank you for the responsiveness to what you've heard from the council, also for coming back to us and then being able to go back out to the partner community. I mean, I do think this is a circle, right? Hopefully a virtuous circle where we're all constantly, I think this, what do you think? I think this, I think, going back and forth. I want to suggest in relationship to the set asides, and particularly the set aside for I'll wait for you to get there. Yes, for culturally specific organizations. I know that 25% is a great number. I want there to be a set aside. I want to recommend that we reconsider that amount because I think it's too low. And that we do some examination of based on the disproportionality that Black, Indigenous, and people of color households and communities experience, both in terms of homelessness and in terms of lack of access to affordable housing. And we use that percentage as a basis for considering what the set aside should be. Again, I appreciate the set aside. I want to set aside. 25% is too low when we think about the disproportionality. And if part of our work is to, I would think a centering part of our work is to get at and eliminate that disproportionality, we're going to have to put our resources in that direction in ways they have never been put in that direction. It's almost like we got to overcompensate for the pendulum having swung over here for so long. We're going to have to come a little bit past center into the real disproportionality statistics in order to try to address the fact that the pendulum's been so far off of center for so long. So just want to suggest that you take another look at that 25% and see what the options are. I mean, I appreciate with our last conversation, you offered us a couple of options for consideration. I'd love to see some of that as we think about the set aside. And that's my only specific thing. As you continue to move forward, I think I asked you this last time, Natasha, what's making your palms sweat and what are you sort of super excited about? I won't ask you that at this point. I just want to say, as you continue to move this work forward, please tap the council in any way that we can be that isn't even these formal presentations and meetings, because I am thrilled by this. And I think this is absolutely the right direction in the work that we all collectively need in the state to move ourselves forward in the place we all want to live. So I just say thank you for it. And what a tremendous way to start 2024.
Okay, any other council feedback or comment? Staff, any further thoughts?
Just appreciation. I think this is, again, I think it's true, Mary Lee, this is a cycle, and I think trusting in our relationships and trusting that we can take something that's not final and really do want to get feedback on it is part of that. And it is a practice, and it is, and I think we need to build and invest in our relationships so that there are direct touch points to have clear conversations and clear alignment with each other. And this whole process takes a whole lot of trust. And I appreciate Housing Stability Council. I really appreciate all of our partners that have been using their trust as much as they can. And I understand also they have a body of work that they're very eager and we want to be able to deliver. And so I want to bring all of those pieces together. This is a tremendous lift, as we have said. The pressure and stress for internal staff around that is not little, and they're doing a tremendous job that I'm incredibly proud of. And so I'm just really excited for this year and to see the pages turn in this chapter. So it's exciting times.
Indeed. So it looks like we are at the end of our scheduled agenda. Just want to see if, yeah, this was a very busy, very intense meeting, but I want to offer a huge thank you to staff, the council, the members of the public who listened, watched, and offered us feedback. Director Bell, oh, wait a minute. No, we'll go to Councilmember Lee first.
Thank you, Chair Hall. I apologize, but I wasn't quite sure where to get this request in. A couple of months ago, I had made a suggestion that we try to explore a practice where we start every council meeting with a listing of the follow-up questions and information and items that the council had requested, so that we, and even if the answer is we haven't gotten to it yet, we just have a running list of the things that we've asked for follow-up on, for information on. And so as it is 2024, I thought I would just remind us all about that. And, if for some reason that's not possible, or there are some considerations, I'm fully able to hear that. And I would love for us to start practicing this, because I know personally, I cannot remember every single thing we talk about, because there's so much and it's so detailed, and where we've asked for feedback or additional information. And I want us to have a little bit of an accountability loop with ourselves here, if that's possible. And open to hear any response to that, not now, but any response that's necessary from a staff perspective is great. Thank you.
Yeah, Chair Hall, if
Yes.
If you don't mind, I'm happy
Dr.
to very briefly respond to that. Thank you, Councilmember Lee, for reemerging that topic and that commitment. We have begun internally since that meeting that we had made a commitment to do so. We have been tracking that internally. It has yet to make it as far as getting it back in front of the council. And so we can certainly, as a follow-up, since we have that is not an administrative burden to one, get that out to the council before the meeting so that we can all have visibility and are not seeing it and hearing it in real time. And we can certainly carve out a few minutes at the top of our agenda to see where we stand on that. So we can be sure to follow through on that and taking that a little further for next month. Yep, thank you.
All right, with that, I think we are at the close of our agenda. Again, thank you, everybody. Hope you have a great rest of your day. And as of this moment, we are adjourned.
Thanks, everybody.